breeze start to Friday, but it's also going to be a generally cloudier start to the day, particularly across western and southern parts of the country. Still some bright spells in the east, and even in the west it will be bright from time to time and mostly dry, but increasingly there will be these spells of rain or showers moving up from Cornwall into Devon, South Wales and perhaps Northern Ireland. With the breeze it's going to feel cooler, but temperatures will still reach 19 Celsius.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next big winner of the Great British Giveaway, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but two sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 20th of March. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Kemi Badenoch has kicked off the Conservatives' local election race in Buckinghamshire, taking massive swipes at both the Reform Party and Labour. We're live on the ground with our political correspondent.
We are indeed. Elsewhere, the Prime Minister will attend a meeting with the Coalition of the Willing later this afternoon to further plans for a peacekeeping force for Ukraine. Comes after a rare visit to a nuclear-armed submarine in a bid to highlight the UK's strength.
Elsewhere, the Prince of Wales has arrived in Estonia to show his support for British troops stationed near the Russian border. We're live in the capital, Tallinn, throughout the show with the latest video.
And the real cost of net zero. A shocking Whitehall assessment has revealed the rush to carbon neutrality risks wiping 10% of our economic growth by the end of this decade and could trigger a financial crash.
And the Formula One team owner and television pundit Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76 after a battle with prostate cancer. We'll be speaking to a Formula F1 driver later this hour. And breaking news this hour, the Bank of England has decided to hold interest rates unchanged at the rate of 4.5%. This comes after the latest reviews saw them cut at the start of this year, down from 4.75 to 4.5%, now held.
Yes, well, joining us now is financial market analyst from Citi Index, Fiona Chin-Cotter. Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Sorry if I butchered your name there. Fiona, we were expecting them to decide to hold the rates, and this is because there are various inflationary pressures, aren't there, at the moment?
Yes, the Bank of England is in a difficult situation right now. We've seen inflation has actually ticked higher. It's up at 3%. Annually, that's 1% higher than the Bank of England's target level of 2%. It's also up from 2.5% at the end of last year. Now, at the same time, we've seen that growth in the UK economy has actually contracted in the start of this year, contracting by 0.1%. Now, why this is difficult for the Bank of England is because when inflation is high or ticking higher, then the Bank of England won't really want to cut interest rates. But when you've got weak growth, that's when the Bank of England would want to cut interest rates in order to support the economy. So because of those sort of two issues that the Bank of England's facing, which require different approaches in monetary policy, they're actually adopting this very gradual wait and see approach, which I think is a sensible position to be taking, especially after the central bank cut interest rates by 25 basis points last month, and given all the uncertainty that we have with the Trump trade tariffs and potential impacts that they may have on the UK economy.
It's an expected picture because analysts were expecting this to happen, I suppose, if that's not a tautology. But of course, several months ago, indeed at the end of last year, we were expecting interest rates perhaps to come lower than this by now. Have the effects of, as you mentioned, Trump's tariffs, but also, frankly, domestic decisions, the budget that we saw at the start of this new government's time in office, have these also made it less likely that interest rates fall at the speed that once they were thought to?
Yeah, it's a very good point that you made there. I mean, at the end of last year, Q4 last year, we were expecting the Bank of England to be potentially able to cut interest rates more aggressively because inflation may have cooled more quickly. I think a point of one issue for the Bank of England is the fact that that wages in the UK are proving to be particularly sticky right now. And that has come, we've seen labour data was released today, wage growth was still 5.9%, which is very high for a target rate of inflation for 2%. So the Bank of England will want to see that come down quickly or more quickly in order to be more comfortable cutting interest rates. And I think there is a potential that we may see that happen a little bit later this year. Obviously, as we move towards April, companies are going to be faced with challenging hiring decisions given the changes that were announced in the Labour government's budget back in October, where they're going to see increased burden on the employer for national insurance contributions and also an increase in the minimum wage. So we could see that that's going to impact the outlook for inflation later on in the year.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Fiona Chin-Cotter, financial market analyst from Citi Index. Great to have you on to explain all of that to us. I mean, yes, this national insurance contributions, that's going to have huge inflationary pressure if it hasn't done or so already. I mean, that could push up the prices in our shops, couldn't it? Then you've got energy costs, which are stubbornly high and rising. What else have you got? Wage growth as well, which sounds like a good thing, but works against those interest rate cuts.
And, of course, the amount of borrowing that the government has undertaken, tens of billions of pounds in extra borrowing, albeit, though, for noble things, whether it's infrastructure investment and the like, yet still it's more that the government is spending compared to the amount it's taking in tax. And what does that mean? There's more money chasing the same amount of goods and services. That means prices tend to go up.
Yeah, I wonder if this is more about domestic policy than it is about the global picture, because, I mean, the US Fed's still planning to cut rates, despite Trump's tariffs, aren't they? as it stands anyway. That's what I've been reading from the United States. We'll see, I suppose. But
Although
I mean, there is an
energy
argument.
picture in the United States is very
much
different.
better. Yeah, much better. They've got cheap energy. We'd have so fewer problems, wouldn't we, in this country if energy was cheaper? Thanks to our successive governments, it is not. It is extremely high, highest in the world.
Yeah, highest. I think it does bounce around, but we had the highest industrial energy prices in the world, certainly in the last couple of years. I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary when we sit on such a wealth of natural resources in this country that almost uniquely we refuse to extract.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of it? Do you think it's the right decision for the Bank of England? I mean, sometimes they're cautious, sometimes they're gun-ho. Are they balancing this in the correct way? I mean, a lot of people will look at this and think, well, we need economic growth. How do you get economic growth? You slash those interest rates, get the money moving around. But no, alas, too many inflationary pressures deem our Bank of England overlords.
Well, let's move on now, because off the back of ditching net zero targets and indeed renewing her party's policies, at least that's what she says she wants to do, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, is today arguing why the Conservatives deserve your vote in May's local elections.
Yeah, speaking a little bit earlier, she argued that they'll bring lower taxes and better services, but admitted it wasn't going to be an easy campaign.
It will be the first time since the general election, the greatest defeat in our party's history, that we fight these seats. And if you mapped that general election result of 2024 onto this coming May, then we don't win the councils like we won in 2021. We lose almost every single one. But I think we're going to do a bit better than that. But we know that these elections will be extremely difficult.
Goodness me, it's like a funeral.
Rolling the pitch, or perhaps
Somber.
just completely decimating the pitch.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I mean,
there's managing expectations, right,
Yeah.
which is important for the Conservatives to do, as they're not in a great place at the moment. Everyone knows that. But, I mean, you know, a little bit of a celebratory mood, no?
I'm not sure it's the best thing to cheer up the troops to say, you know what, we could lose every single seat at this election. I mean,
It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
It's a difficult job for the leader of the opposition state. I mean, these seats were last contested at the height of Boris Johnson's popularity.
Yeah.
It was the vaccine bounce election. The approval rating for the government was through the roof.
The vaccine bounce election.
Everything, I mean, this was the same election when Boris Johnson won a parliamentary seat off the Labour Party when he was in government. Governments aren't meant to win by elections, they're meant to either hold or lose them. And yet he was gaining during, I mean, it was an extraordinary time in our politics. And so that is the benchmark to which we're now comparing the Conservatives, once with a majority of 80 seats, now with the fewest seats that the party has ever held in modern history. I mean, of course, comparing those two things, expectations need to be set.
Yeah. And we should say that we are going to bring you all of the election launches from the various different parties. It just so happens that the Conservatives are today.
Indeed. We should say that our reporter, Catherine Forster, has been at that launch, and indeed she asked a question of Kemi Badenoch over really whether the Conservatives could be trusted. Let's listen in.
No matter how good your local councillors may be, people very often vote on a verdict on the national party. Under the Conservatives, we had well over a decade of economic stagnation, wages barely moving. You're surrounded by posters saying lower taxes, better services. But in government, the Conservatives delivered the opposite of that. Why are people going to trust you now? Isn't going to take a lot longer, realistically, for you to get a hearing?
They will trust us because we have delivered lower taxes than any other party. Labour's raising taxes even higher. But at local level, Conservative councils consistently deliver better services at a lower rate. Look at Birmingham, that's raising taxes up by 21%. We don't do that. So people right now will be getting their council tax bills for the year. The Conservative councils are lower. If you vote for something else, you will get something much worse. So we are standing on our record. I'm not here to say that we got everything right or we were perfect. That's far from the truth, because if we were, we would still be in government. What I am here to say is that this is a party that is under new leadership, that is going back to authentic Conservative principles and has a record that it can stand on.
I mean, the Conservatives may have lost big at the last general election, but I think it is fair to say that they have some positive stories to tell at the local level.
Yes.
In terms of keeping those council taxes lower than in neighbouring Labour constituencies.
I mean, we were just having this conversation earlier today, weren't we? I live in a Labour borough in London. You live in... Oh, no, is yours now Labour?
It's Labour now. Historically Conservative, yes.
And I pay about twice as much council tax as you do. Oh, the joys of local government.
Yes, and I doubt you get your bins collected double the amount of times.
No, it's every 2 weeks for the main one.
Every 2 weeks? That's a shocker, isn't it? That's a shocker. Although, weren't we talking about Bristol, where they were thinking about a month, once a month? Hopefully that won't happen to the Bristolians, beautiful city in this country.
But I mean, this is the case about councils across the country. Look at how many have gone bankrupt and are reducing services. They're asking constituents to pay more council tax and are getting worse services in return. It's an extraordinary state of affairs.
Yeah, I do wonder how much waste there is at the local level, but it's hard to know for sure, isn't it?
And not enough waste collection. That's
not enough waste collection. Too much wasting of our money, our hard-earned money, and not enough collecting of it, yes. But we're going to be bringing you full coverage, as we said, of the local elections, including the launches of all the parties ahead of voting on the 1st of May, so stay tuned for that.
Elsewhere today, the Prince of Wales is due to arrive at the presidential palace in Tallinn, Estonia, for talks with the Estonian president.
Yes, His Royal Highness is visiting Estonia to meet British troops on the border with Russia, to learn about how they're working to help bolster NATO's front lines and to learn a little more about how they're responding to the conflict in Ukraine.
Well, our very own royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us live from Tallinn now. And Cameron, this is a busy day for the Prince.
Yeah, it really is, Tom. I'm outside the presidential palace here in Tallinn, and he's due to arrive relatively shortly. Of course, it's a highly symbolic visit because Prince William is not only the future king, but he's also future head of the armed forces. And of course, defence is a huge theme of this two-day visit. It comes at a critical time of global tensions. And of course, we know Ukraine, the offensive against Ukraine from Russia continues on. And Prince William tomorrow will be visiting a NATO base, the Tapa Army Base, which has the highest number permanent deployed UK troops anywhere in the world, 900 or so of them. And Prince William is Colonel-in-Chief of the Mercian Regiment, and that regiment is going to be taking over as the battle group for the next 6 months, carrying on with exercises right on the Russian border. It's only 62 miles from the Russian border, or an hour and a half's drive. But today, the focus is very much here in Tallinn. So the Prince will be meeting the President of Estonia for a bilateral meeting. Of course, all of this is sanctioned by the Foreign Office, sanctioned by the government. And he's going to be focusing on the plight of Ukrainian refugees, because 60,000 of them fled to Estonia following the start of that conflict in 2022, which is the equivalent, if you go by population numbers, of around 3 million descending on the UK. And he's going to be visiting a school which was built rapidly to continue the education of Ukrainian refugee children. He wants to focus, we're told, on mental health provision for those children and learn how they are settling in to their new lives here in Estonia. But I think perhaps another interesting point in terms of the Prince and talking to the President is what he's going to be doing after that school visit. And he's going to be looking at clean tech, because Estonia is one of the kind of leading countries in terms of new innovative clean tech. And what that means is it's trying to focus away from the reliance on Chinese technology and Russian power, and perhaps making it homegrown. And because, of course, it's a European nation, a European Union nation, perhaps this is Prince William's soft power in play here, strengthening relations between the United Kingdom and, of course, Estonia, a European Union nation. There are 4 flags which are flying outside the presidential palace here: the European Union, the Union flag, and NATO and Estonia. And I think that vision tomorrow of Prince William on a NATO base 62 miles from the Russian border is going to be one that's going to be projected around the world.
Very interesting indeed. Cameron Walker, thank you very much for being in Tallinn for us, the beautiful city in Estonia, where Prince William is making his visit. Tom, it's quite interesting. There seems to be a two-spronged approach today. You've got the Prime Minister in Barrow, talking defence, talking about keeping European security, and then you've got Prince William out and about in Estonia talking about similar matters.
Yeah, it's no coincidence, is it? I mean, there is, of course, conversation and coordination between the Foreign Office, the Palace and Number 10. And this is clearly a moment where Britain sees itself as stepping up on the global stage. I mean, coordinating this so-called coalition of the willing to try and guarantee any peace in Ukraine in the future. It is interesting to see, actually, how the British Prime Minister is able to act as that bridge between European countries and the United States and convene many European countries, but also NATO countries like Canada as well, in this coalition without having to be part of any European supranational union.
Well, I hope you're right. That was a generous description of what's going on, I think.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's difficulties with the European Union at the moment. So we're hearing that we're not going to be part of this defence pact, and that Keir Starmer, if he wants us to be part of this defence pact, then he has to sign up to giving away our fishing rights in the waters to the French, and the EU's not going to buy our arms despite the importance of European security. I mean, it's just a protectionist racket, isn't it?
We don't need the EU to buy our arms. I mean, we've got bilateral deals with France, we've got bilateral deals with Italy. I mean, the defence hasn't traditionally been organised through the European Union. It's been organised through NATO structures.
Trying to bully us, I think. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, the real cost of net zero. A shocking Whitehall assessment has revealed the rush to carbon neutrality risks wiping 10% of our economic growth by the end of this decade and triggering a financial crash.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As a steak and ale is the most popular one. That's the one that's in the British Pie Awards. We've got chicken. We do a just steak. All the steak is slow cooked overnight, and then we shred it and mix it with Tracy's signature gravy. We've also now been able to put fruit pies on, and we do quiches as well.
This family-run pie shop in Dinnington is going for a big win at the British Pie Awards. The busy South Yorkshire store has only been open for 6 weeks, and already it's hoping for a prize for its pies.
It's British tradition. You know, it lets especially independent people like us to get his name out there, especially if we win the award. Everybody loves a good pie, especially with we do meals with the mash and the chips and the peas and the gravy. We'll put baked beans on if they want them. It's just tradition, isn't it? Everybody loves a good pie.
For the customers here, pies are one of Britain's best dishes.
They're always full of goodness, aren't they? Hearty, filling, and you could put them with so many things, different vegetables, different types of potatoes. Yeah, just good all-rounder.
Feel-good food, innit? Pies, yeah. It's not like takeaway food, it's just feel-good food. Feel at home, you know.
If it's got a nice filling and a nice pastry, there's nothing better. But just like them, the easy meals. My family love all the pies here. I've come in about 3 times a week this week, especially the quiches that you can see coming out of the oven. They're freshly made, you can take them home and freeze them.
So here we go, we've got the Handmade Pie Company's steak and ale pie, the one that's been entered for the awards. Let's give it a try. That is absolutely delicious.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 20 minutes past 12. We're going to head straight back to Buckinghamshire, speaking with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who, of course, has been at the Conservatives' local election launch. Catherine, it seemed a bit of a dour speech from the Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, well, good afternoon from Beaconsfield, true blue territory, if such a thing still exists after the last election, which I think is a little bit questionable. Well, yes, because the Conservatives have an absolute mountain to climb with these local elections, but who better to hear from than the Shadow Secretary of State for Local Government, Kevin Hollinrake. Kevin, thank you very much for talking to us today, but, you know, Boris Johnson, the vaccine bounce, you were at a high watermark. These results are going to be pretty dreadful for the Conservatives, aren't they?
Well, it can be more difficult. I mean, we won Hartlepool May 2021, so those things were going really well for us then. It's been more difficult since, of course, for various different reasons. But around the country, we're winning. We're winning. We won last night in Three Rivers, just down the road here, against Lib Dem, against Reform. It was a Lib Dem seat, and we won that. We won in Harborough last night as well. We've won in Fylde, Edinburgh, won in Tiptree and Essex recently. Right around the country, we get good candidates who work hard and knock on the doors. We can win, and that's what we'll be doing.
But you've got placards here saying lower taxes, better services. No matter how good your local council is, people tend to look at the national picture. Do you think voters are anywhere near done with punishing the Conservatives for your record over 15 years?
Well, of course, we understand right now, you know, we lost decisively about eight months ago, and that's the reality. We have to accept that fact, and it's going to take us a while to rebuild. But look at the national picture. Conservatives, your council tax is lower in the Conservative councils. You are more likely to get your bin emptied. You're more likely to get your potholes filled. You're less likely to have fly tipping, all those things. Whereas in some of the crazy councils around the country, you've got the Labour Mayor of West Midlands, whose number one priority is Gaza. You've got Bradford City Council, whose number one priority is spending £30 million on some fountains in the middle of the city, despite their huge problems in that city. So we set the priorities right. We get the priorities right. We get the services right. That's what people are voting for. Do not vote for a party of protest. Vote for Conservatives, because your services will be better, and we're much more likely to hold Labour to account for all the things they are doing. I mean, absolutely. I remember Keir Starmer saying there wouldn't be a single penny increase in council tax this year. It's up an average £109. It was a barefaced lie. That's the reality. So if anybody can hold them to account, it's us.
The Lib Dems are in second place here, but Reform split the vote at the last election, though the Conservatives did stay in. You talk about don't vote for a protest party. I'm assuming you're talking about Reform. How worried are you about them in these elections specifically?
Of course we're worried about them, and we're across the country we've got those concerns, and this is competition. It's competitive business, is politics, but it is a party of protest. I mean, Rupert Lowe said it himself before he was suspended from his own party. He said it's a party of protest led by a messiah. So it's clearly, if he says it, it must be true, because he was in the party itself. So that's not the right thing to do right now. You're seeing some things Labour is doing, stripping away funding from rural areas, moving the housing away from cities into rural areas. You're seeing increases right across the country, including South Worcestershire here, over 80% increase, whilst Birmingham and Coventry are actually having the targets reduced. So all these things we can hold the government to account for, and we need to do that. I don't think Reform can play that role.
Fighting talk from you, Kevin Hollinrake. Thank you very much for talking to us on GB News. So they've got an incredible mountain to climb. It's going to be a very, very busy few weeks. Let's see what the Conservatives can do. Back to you.
Great stuff, Catherine. Thanks indeed for bringing us that live from Buckinghamshire.
Yes, indeed, but we're going to move on because something else has emerged today. A never-before-published Whitehall assessment of the effects of net zero, this time on the British economy, has been leaked to the Sun newspaper.
Indeed, the leaked document warns that poor planning for going carbon neutral by 2050 comes with the risk of destabilising the financial system, wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and triggering a financial crash.
Well, joining us now is Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation, Harry Wilkinson. I mean, Harry, if the government's own assessment is saying that we're going to knock off 10% of our economy and potentially a financial crash to go with that too. Why haven't the public been told?
Well, this is really a staggering finding. We'll have to wait and see when that report, if it does get published, what are the exact details and what the assumptions they've used. But a 10% knock to GDP by 2030, that would be incredible. That would be, you know, one of the biggest hits to GDP that we've ever seen. It would be a catastrophic event for this country. And so if the government really is warning that its own net zero agenda is going to cause a 10% drop in GDP, that would be devastating. We've already seen an enormous amount of harm done by the drive to net zero. The GWPF has been warning about that for some time. And this comes down to this concept around stranded assets. That was one of the concepts mentioned in this report. They warn that, you know, £2 trillion worth of assets could be at risk from net zero. And, you know, if you have a choice-based approach to decarbonisation, where people choose to use green technologies because they're cheaper, then you don't have this risk of stranded assets, because actually there is a gradual change. And, you know, that's just part of the ordinary competition that we see in the economy that actually generates growth. It doesn't harm growth. So, you know, where we have these risks and concepts of stranded assets, it's where government regulation is suddenly going to make various industries uninvestable, whether that's North Sea gas, whether that's shale that we've just decided that we're not going to do, whether that's petrol and diesel vehicles that consumers are being forced not to use. The risks from net zero all come from government interventions, and heavy-handed interventions at that.
It's about the way that we get there. Harry, I want you to react quickly to something, perhaps a mishap that happened in the House of Commons this morning. Lucy Powell, the leader of the Commons, was asked about net zero. Shall we have a listen to her response?
We cannot ignore net zero. It's not just important for the climate, but it's absolutely critical to lowering jobs. Lowering bills, creating jobs.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Freudian slip or an accidental telling of the truth?
A Freudian slip perhaps there, but, you know, it does beg the question, how is Labour really going to get bills down? They don't seem to have a plan. What they've said they're going to do is build a lot more offshore wind, but increasingly that wind is going to be blowing where there's already plenty of wind, so we're actually going to have to be paying to switch that off, while still dealing with these long periods where we have Dunkelflauters and there's no wind, both here and also in Europe, where we're supposed to be getting that energy from through the interconnectors. So, you know, it's confusing to see, you know, what extra value is this extra wind going to provide, and how is that going to get bills down? Labour don't seem to have answers to these questions.
Yeah, and I think we need some answers to those questions, to be honest, Harry. Harry Wilkinson, thank you very much indeed, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Very sceptical about the goal of net zero, clearly. But just imagine, 10% of our economy by 2030, despite the target being 2050, and a potential crash of the economy, a global financial crash, debt and inflation spiralling. I mean, it sounds pretty awful, doesn't it?
We had 4 years of debate over Brexit. Actually, probably more than that, given the sort of how high it was in the public consciousness in the lead up to the referendum. I mean, we had national conversations and national debate over the economic impact, and at the outside, I mean, the most grim economic forecasts about Brexit from the most pessimistic economists were it could be 5% lower.
Yeah.
And now, what did we have with net zero? No debate. A nod
You're not allowed to have a debate.
A nod through the House of Commons with no vote, no referendum, no national conversation, and yet this policy could be, I mean, it could have the largest economic impact of any single policy decision that this government has, that this country has faced in modern times.
And on individual liberties and general lifestyle, quality of life. everything that affects people is affected by net zero legislation in one way or another. Regulations, that is. But you're absolutely right. We had endless discussions over Brexit. Now, to be honest, I am sceptical about how they come to these types of estimates. I mean, they are, you know, kind of pluck a figure out of the air, aren't they? You know, some research does go into these figures, of course, but you can never be 100% accurate.
No one has a model that accurately...
You don't have a crystal ball.
Sort of can guess the individual decisions of 7 or 8 million people alive on this planet today. I mean, no computer can do that. Of course you can't know what the economy is going to look like.
Remember those Brexit debates? I mean, you know, BBC's Question Time, where there'd be 4 Remainers and then 1 Brexiteer who was treated like a pariah. And then the British public voted Brexit. Oof, that hurt a lot of people, didn't it?
I remember those well. But no, it is...
You took part in probably a lot of them.
Yeah, no, it's...
You're a plucky young Brexiteer, you were.
Oh, those were the days. God, can you believe it's been almost a decade? I mean, that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, time is flying.
But it is an important question to ask. I mean, why has there not been the level of intensity and national debate over these, I would argue, bigger decisions?
Because you were called a climate denier, and broadcasters had to be very careful about putting forward that type of opinion, right?
But I mean,
so it was sort of...
But it's
quashed.
It's so reductive to say that if you disagree with the response to climate change, you must therefore deny the fact that climate change is happening.
But a lot of people were called racist for wanting to come out of the European Union, even if their opinion was based on economics or just national sovereignty.
Yeah, no one has ever been called a racist if they supported the independence of the Republic of Ireland from the United Kingdom, or the independence of Canada from the United States of America, or the independence of New Zealand from Australia. I mean, those are all legitimate national sovereignty decisions, even though arguably these countries would all be richer if they were combined with the countries that they neighboured to.
Well, it's Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. It's not only Prince William out and about today in Estonia. The King and Queen are continuing their surprise visit in Northern Ireland. We're live on the ground after your headlines.
It is 12:32, Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has held interest rates at their current level of 4.5%. It comes at a time of increasing economic uncertainty and amid the threats of tariffs to global trade. The bank will have also considered rising costs associated with the government's first budget and the additional bill from employers' natural insurance contributions, which comes into effect next month. So borrowing costs, they have been gradually reduced since August through lower mortgage rates benefiting some households. Last night, the US Federal Reserve held its rates but downgraded its economic forecast, warning that President Trump's tariffs were driving up prices. The Prime Minister will host senior military figures from more than 20 countries later to discuss his plans for the coalition of the willing to deploy peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer will first visit Barrow-in-Furness to lay the keel of a nuclear deterrent submarine after hailing the town as a blueprint for how increasing defence spending can boost prosperity. It comes after his visit to HMS Vanguard as it returned home from a 200-day deployment. Sir Keir says defence spending will benefit the whole country, but the Tory party chairman, Tom Huddleston, says Labour are simply regurgitating Conservative policies.
Welcome the fact that Labour are stealing some of our policies when it comes to tackling welfare spending and obviously increasing defence spending. But there is clear blue water between us and Labour.
Donald Trump suggested the US could take ownership of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to act as a form of security guarantee. White House officials say it was discussed in a phone call between Mr. Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky last night, a day after the US president spoke to Vladimir Putin. Well, Ukraine's leaders indicated only the Zaporizhzhia nuclear facility on the front line of the war was discussed. It's been under Russian control since March 2022. Zelensky is expected to brief EU leaders on his call with Donald Trump shortly. The leaders are meeting in Brussels, where they are expected to pledge unwavering support for Ukraine. Zelensky says Russian strikes overnight have exposed Vladimir Putin's true attitude towards peace. Meanwhile, a state of emergency has been declared in the Russian Saratov region, in the town of Engels, following a Ukrainian drone attack on a strategic air bomber base. Now, that is more than 430 miles from the front lines, but the explosions have caused damage in nearby villages. 2 people have been killed in Ukraine's Donetsk region as a result of attacks there. Former Formula One owner, broadcaster Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. Jordan revealed in December he had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. He ran his own F1 team between 1991 and 2005. Michael Schumacher once drove for him. He moved into a broadcasting role after that. His family say he passed away peacefully, surrounded by loved ones in his home in Cape Town. Those are your latest headlines. I'll be back with more around 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. There are delays of up to an hour and 20 minutes to Stena Line sailings between Cairnryan and Belfast. On the M6 in Cheshire, the outside lanes closed southbound just off the junction 19 at Knutsford after an accident causing queues. On the M25 in Kent, the inside lanes closed clockwise just before the Clackett Lane services where a van's broken down causing queues. Further into Surrey, the inside lanes closed clockwise where a lorry has a puncture just before junction 8 at Reigate with queues from junction 7 for the M23. And anti-clockwise as a lane closed just off the junction 13 at Staines after an accident, with queues from junction 14 at Heathrow. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply. Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 12. Now, today, the King and Queen continue their official visit to Northern Ireland.
Yes, this morning, the streets in Limavady were lined with locals hoping to see and speak to their majesties.
Well, joining us now live is GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what's on the agenda today, and have you spotted the King and Queen yet?
Yes, I arrived here very early this morning. Indeed, crowds were out here from about 8 o'clock this morning trying to queue to actually get a good position to see them. The sun shone on Limavady, this little town in the northwest of the province. In fact, it is a smashing little town because the high street still has local shops in it, which, as you know, is a rarity. King Charles and Camilla arrived in at about 10:30 this morning. They visited a local bakery. They went to the town hall behind us where they've just left a few moments ago, and the crowds were absolutely delighted to see them. Here's a few of them that I spoke to.
He just shook my hand and he said it was lovely to be here. And I'm just so glad I could shake his hand. I'm so excited. It's a really big day for Limavady because nothing like this ever happens here. And it's just a complete and utter surprise, excitement and an honour to have both of the royalties here.
I got a really good look at the King and Queen. I wish I got to shake their hand, but it was brilliant to see them both here in Limavady. And it was just a complete honour to be able to see that.
Oh, it's brilliant, yeah. Really perked the town up this morning. We were happy to see the King, weren't we? And the Queen.
Oh, amazing. It was so good, wasn't it?
We are just so delighted they came to Limavady. It was brilliant. And we got a really good view.
It was brilliant.
Well, it was most unusual to actually have them in regional towns because yesterday, of course, they went to the two cities of Belfast and Lisburn to other engagements. So the people here absolutely delighted. It is memories for their children as they brought and kept most of them out of school to actually see the monarchs arrive here. There is a great feeling about the town now. They are heading now back towards Belfast and we will pick them up later on in the afternoon.
Doogie Beattie, thank you very much, our Northern Ireland reporter. It's lovely, Tom, to see how genuinely excited and happy people are to see the monarchs, our monarchs, out and about in the flesh.
And the sunshine came out for them too. It's a bit like in 1588 when God decided that he would provide a storm for the Spanish Armada to save the country. I mean, clearly our royal family have always been viewed highly by those above.
But isn't it nice? The first day of spring, the sunshine is out, 19 degrees it's going to hit down here. I heard it's also going to be 18 degrees in Manchester, 12 in Aberdeen actually, but it's going to be sun. So get outside.
After the programme, of course.
After the programme.
Stay on your sofa.
No, you can listen to us on the radio outside.
You've got 2 hours and 15 minutes and then you can go outside. Sorry, Martin Daubney. Now, we're going to move on to the world.
Dog eat dog.
Oh, it really is. But we're going to move on now to the world of Formula One, which, of course, is paying tribute to the charismatic former team boss, Eddie Jordan.
Yes, earlier today, his family announced he has died at the age of 76 after battling with an aggressive form of prostate cancer.
Well, he was renowned for unearthing some of the sport's greats, having handed seven-time F1 world champion Michael Schumacher his debut back in 1991.
Wow, well, joining us now is former F1 driver Perry McCarthy. Perry, thank you very much indeed. A sad day for those who knew him. But tell us, did you have a relationship with Eddie?
Oh, over 40 years. He was a handful. He really was. And I mean, there was a lot of affection for Eddie, and also, to praise him. His achievements were incredible. A real wheeler dealer, but known also as being an incredible character, mischievous to the core, believe me, but very, very bright, very, very intelligent, and very driven.
What do you think his legacy will be for the sport? Because I've been reading this morning just how much he had this talent for spotting people that perhaps weren't that well known when they got their big break with Eddie.
I think that happened a couple of times. I mean, most remarkably with Michael Schumacher, which Eddie took on toward the end of 1991 under strange circumstances, to be quite honest. I won't bore you with that. But Michael first got his break. But of course, Michael showed his brilliance inside what was a terribly good car. So Jordan really came into playing Formula One with a great design by Gary Anderson. And they were immediately toward the front. Michael showed what that car could do. And then Eddie, being astute, tried to maneuver it, but he lost Michael actually over to Benetton. The other one, the guy you can see in the picture here, was really getting Eddie Irvine his big break as well. And then Eddie went on to be a big star, and Eddie Jordan actually managed to profit from selling him to Ferrari. Eddie Irvine became a major source of income to the Jordan Grand Prix team. People remember Eddie Jordan for making things happen, really overcoming the impossible, starting off with a small team, fighting like mad to stay into what is a really high finance sport and making it happen and succeeding with 4 Grand Prix wins and at one time being very much a challenger for the World Championship.
And he was always like the best of us, very opinionated, wasn't he, Perry?
He was definitely not short of opinions, but he was, he was a really serious guy on, making things work and his kind of kind of insight to people. You know, that the Irish charm, he got around them, he made things happen. But he would always spot opportunity for fun. I remember there was one time in France, there was me, Eddie, and Andrew Ridgeley, actually, from Wham. And we went out to a club together, and we ended up, I got on the piano, Eddie got on the drums, and Andrew was singing. It was just any moment in time for a laugh. And that's where we had this big affection for Eddie.
Oh, it sounds like he'll really be missed.
Yeah.
Eddie Jordan. Rest in peace. Thank you very much indeed, Perry McCarthy, for giving us an insight into what it was like to know him as a man. You're the former F1 driver, of course. Thank you very much. Well, there you go.
No, it's so important and so special to hear those personal stories.
Absolutely. So he liked to go to the clubs, get up on the table, maybe, or just play a bit of music. But if you're in search of some winter sun, perhaps in a hot country, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
For the time being, at least, the UK is warmer than Greece, where cold winds continue to blow. Warm sunshine in Italy, but very unsettled once again for Portugal into Spain. Spells of rain, strong winds, 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in places, and an awful lot of rain as low pressure continues to dominate. That rain spreading into the south of France as well, largely avoiding Italy, where it's going to stay warm and sunny, but this cold wind continues to blow through Greece, although temperatures will recover over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a beautiful day out there today, dry, sunny for many, although not for all, and feeling warm. In fact, it's likely to be the warmest day of the year so far, the first time we exceed 20 Celsius in the UK in 2025. Low pressure is edging closer towards the southwest, and ahead of that we've got this southerly wind picking up. That's going to bring the higher temperatures through the day. It's also going to bring largely cloud-free skies, although some hazy upper cloud is expected in many places and some patchy lower cloud at times as well, particularly across central parts. That aside, it's dry for everyone and it is going to be bright and warm. Temperatures widely in the mid to high teens and in some spots, particularly through southeast into central England as well as parts of Wales, 20 or 21 Celsius. Now, the far north of Scotland will be cooler. Temperatures at 5 p.m, 7 Celsius, but across much of Scotland it's certainly going to be dry, it's going to be clear as we go into the evening. And Northern Ireland likewise, just some patchy high cloud, but for England and Wales, widespread clear skies away from the southwest, where actually at this stage in the day the wind will be picking up and we'll see the cloud thickening, and that's ahead of the low pressure system I mentioned. That's going to bring in some showery rain by midnight into Cornwall, sweeping into perhaps parts of Pembrokeshire, and then later in the night Ireland and Northern Ireland. But across many western areas, certainly a cloudier night to come, as well as into the south. Clear skies for the north of Scotland, and out of the breeze, perhaps a touch of frost, but certainly because of the breeze and the extra cloud, for most of us, it's going to be a frost-free start to Friday. But it is going to be a cloudier start for many, and we'll see these outbreaks of showery rain into western parts of the country, perhaps some thunderstorms in one or two places. Interspersed by dry spells, and it's going to stay dry in the east, as well as bright. Another warm day to come before it turns cooler this weekend.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
12:50 is the time. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Stop the stink, Tom.
Yes, that's the campaign headed up by locals in Fleetwood. Fleetwood, not Fleetwood Mac, but that's over a landfill that they say is making them sick.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely awful. Residents say it smells like a rotten egg. So bad it's inducing headaches, vomiting and nosebleeds.
Well, they want to shut the landfill down, of course. Our Northwest of England reporter Sophie Reaper is up in Fleetwood for us. Sophie, it sounds like I'm glad that smell-o-vision doesn't exist.
You're not the first person to say that to me today, Tom. And in fact, I did come prepared. I was told how bad it was, so I came with my very own nose peg, just in case it got too bad for me to bear. Now, we've been told that actually today is not one of the bad days, that in fact, we've been given a respite from just how bad it gets. Residents have told me today it's about a 2 out of 10, the smell. But when it gets going, that people feel unable to leave their homes, that they're, as you said, they're having nosebleeds, they're having headaches, they're being sick. So joining me now is one local resident to talk a little bit about the impacts that this landfill site is having, Mike Tomlin, and his beautiful dog, who I think we can see now. There he is, Cullen. Thank you both so much for joining us this afternoon. Talk to me about this landfill site. Obviously, it was open originally and then closed back in 2017. You moved in back in 2020, is that correct? And then this site reopened in 2023. Talk to me about what it's been like since it opened.
Since it opened in 2023, when they first opened the landfill again, the smell was horrific. And we kept being promised every week that the smell would go away, they would get it under control. They even explained what they were going to do. But they didn't get it under control until about November last year. And then we had November and December was reasonably good, but up till then it had been horrible. And then after the storm in January, the smell started again, and it's been every day since, though that's dependent on the wind direction. So at the moment you're having a good day because the wind's going the opposite way, but the people south of the site will now be having a smelly day, so it's pretty bad.
I feel very fortunate that we're not having a bad day. But just try and give a sense of the smell to our viewers. What is it like? What would you compare it to?
To me it smells like the bottom of a dirty bin. It's pretty horrific. It catches you in the back of the throat. I personally haven't had any health issues with it, but I know lots of people that have. But it is a horrible smell, making the environment, which is beautiful, but just making it horrible. You can't spend much time outside on the days when it's bad. I, for example, 2 years ago built an outside kitchen to be fairly sociable. But the number of days that you can't plan to use it, because if you get people around on a day with the smells there, you just got to sit in the house because you can't sit outside.
I really quickly want to ask you, we're joined by your beautiful dog. Are you worried at all about the impact on animals?
I hadn't been, but I assume that in the same way that I don't get impacted by it from a health perspective, some dogs must be impacted by it because it can't be good. And their sense of smell and everything else is thousands of times better than ours. I brought him out last night at midnight, at 11 o'clock for his last walk. And the smell round here was horrific because there was no wind, so the stench was just going everywhere. It was horrible last night.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It does sound truly awful. We just want to read out a couple of statements for legal reasons now. We've heard from Transwaste, who own this site. They say previous intermittent odour problems were caused by work to bring Cell 5 up to operational standards. These problems have now been resolved and the cell has been completely capped and sealed. Unfortunately, the new Cell 6 started producing gas much earlier and at a higher rate than expected. As a result, we have stopped waste deliveries and are working to cap Cell 6 with a thick layer of clay in order to completely seal it. We also heard from Wyeborough Council and they told me that they are working
Okay, Sophie Reaper, I'm afraid we've run to the end of the hour, but we'll see you.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's dry and bright for most of us today, and it's the warmest day of the year so far, with temperatures in places above 20 Celsius. But showers are expected to arrive overnight because of this area of low pressure starting to head our way. Now, ahead of that low, we've got a warm southerly breeze, so temperatures higher compared with recent days. But going into the evening, we'll see an increased breeze and increased cloud cover into the south and west of the UK. Perhaps some showers arriving by midnight into Cornwall. Hit and miss downpours. They spread into Pembrokeshire and Northern Ireland by dawn. perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well. But of course, with the cloud and the increased breeze, for most it's a frost-free and a milder start to Friday. But for the north of Scotland, with some shelter from the winds, there will be a touch of frost first thing. However, certainly a milder start for much of England and Wales. A thick cloud for Wales and the southwest with outbreaks of showery rain and perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well in some of the heavier bursts. Northern Ireland also seeing some cloud and showery rain, but for Scotland it's another bright start to the day, and this is where the lowest temperatures will be. I think the north of Scotland prone to a few pockets of frost in sheltered spots, but for most it is going to be a frost-free start to Friday. And then an east-west divide. I think in the west we're going to see thick cloud, outbreaks of rain, heavy at times. Towards the east it stays dry and bright for one more day, albeit with more cloud in the sky compared with recent days, and an increased breeze. That's still coming from the south, so it's still going to bring temperatures of the mid to high teens, but it's going to feel a little cooler, particularly along the east coast in that gusty wind. The wind picks up further on Friday night. Gales developing in the far north of Scotland, and further south we've got further spells of rain pushing in from the southwest, and that leads us on to an unsettled weekend. More cloud compared with the week so far, outbreaks of rain and showers, and feeling a little cooler.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the parents in the right, or should they really be taking their kids out during holiday, during end of term break?
Good morning. Yes, it's a real interesting one, but I think there are a few problems with it. There are already 443,000 absences per year. And actually, if they did get their policy and everyone could have this time off, holiday companies aren't here for the fun of it. They're going to just up the prices all year round. And I think that's what this is about. A lot of parents want to grab an absolute bargain. And it's kind of selfish because a holiday is a choice. It's not a necessity. One of the other things they talk about is SEND children also need to have time off. Now, I am a mum of a child who has a disability, so I understand the complex needs with that, but that's a given. You know, that's something to take up with a local authority. It's a you're allowed to have time off if your child has a medical condition. So, yeah.
It's obviously quite a divisive issue, isn't it? It does separate people into 2 camps. There's people who want to take their kids out during term time to save a bit of cash, and then there's people who think that children should be in school when they're supposed to be in school. How do you think they'll get on with this campaign? Do you think they'll have any success?
Well, I don't think they will, to be honest with you. I think it's too small. And the other thing is it's quite disruptive on the classroom. If you can imagine, I already play catch up because my son has half a day off a week. So I can imagine if that's going on all year round with all the children, trying to keep track of it, sounds an absolute nightmare to me. I mean, personally, I'd rather just go away on holiday on my own without my child and have some relaxation. So that would be my advice to them. Get the granny in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 20th of March. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, Kemi Badenoch has kicked off the Conservatives' local election race in Buckinghamshire. She's taken massive swipes at both Reform and Labour. We're live on the ground with our political correspondent.
Elsewhere, the Prime Minister will attend a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing later this afternoon. It comes after a rare visit to a nuclear-armed submarine, all in a bid to highlight the UK's military might.
Right, and the Prince of Wales has arrived in Estonia to show his support for British troops stationed near the Russian border. We're also live in the capital Tallinn throughout the show with the latest pictures.
Elsewhere, the real cost of net zero. A shocking Whitehall assessment has revealed the rush to carbon neutrality risks wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and potentially triggering a financial crash.
Oh, great. Tom, now I think there's a very good idea coming out of Hungary. Now, a lot of people will disapprove of the fact it's coming from Hungary because, we don't want to listen to that right-wing country and that government. But they are doing quite a lot when it comes to trying to get women to have babies.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not really using immigration to increase their population. Instead, they're trying to look at, women who are living there already, Hungarian women, and think, how can we make them have babies? Well, the latest idea, and I think they're doing it, actually, is to say that if you have 2 or more children as a woman, you don't have to pay any personal income tax for the rest of your life. I say that sounds fantastic. Bring it here. I'd have 10.
I think pro-natalist policy, as it's known,
Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it?
trying to encourage people to have babies is a very good thing.
Yes.
It's a very, very good thing. The problem is that Hungary has tried these kind of tax incentives for the last decade or so, and they haven't managed to significantly shift their birth rate.
I think this one would work.
I would be entirely in favour of it if it would be proven to work. The problem is Hungary still has quite a low birth rate.
But this is just happening now. So we'd have to review it, wouldn't we, in a couple of years' time, in a few years' time, and see if actually more babies are being born. But it would be people who've got... For who this would be a considerable boon. So people who've got good jobs, which is good.
Yeah.
People who can afford to keep their kids, which is good.
But would this be the kind of people who are having babies anyway?
Well, I don't know, because in this country, a lot of middle-class women are putting it off and off and off and off.
Yeah, delaying it, that's a big problem.
Because they want a certain quality of life and they don't want to give up their careers. This way, you kind of have a massive incentive to not only have more children, but also to get back to work.
Yeah, I just know that
I've read
a lot of these sort of pro-natalist analysis of policy. Pro-baby.
Pro-baby, much better. Pro-baby.
And it is weird, because you would think that financial incentives would work, but it doesn't seem that they are the biggest thing that shifts it.
I think this would work.
If we look back to the baby boom that we saw after the war in this country, it was sort of a twin-peaked baby boom in the United Kingdom. It correlated with the advent of labour-saving devices, things like washing machines and ironing boards and sort of mod cons, dishwashers. I mean, this is what actually correlates with... the adoption of this technology correlates with the baby boom.
It was the pill that stopped women having children.
Well, that's what ended the baby boom.
Yeah, that's what ended it.
Or at least we shouldn't be so prescriptive. Correlated with the decline of fertility.
I mean, some people think... people always say, if the government paid for childcare, then everyone would be having 6 million babies each. So that's another financial incentive, isn't it? But others will say this is discrimination against men.
Or just unaffordable.
Or just unaffordable. Or just unaffordable. GBNews.com/you'll say we are going to be having the debate because we've got 2 people with very different opinions who are going to go at it, apparently. But that's after your news headlines.
Thanks very much indeed, Emily. It's just after 1 o'clock. Our top stories. The Prime Minister will host senior military figures from around 20 countries shortly to discuss his plans for the Coalition of the Willing and their hopes to deploy peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. Ahead of that, Sir Keir Starmer has been meeting school children in Barrow in Furness ahead of a visit to a submarine manufacturing site where the next generation of Britain's nuclear deterrents are being built. It comes after the Prime Minister boarded HMS Vanguard on its return home from a 200-day deployment in a display of Britain's nuclear deterrent. Well, the Prime Minister says Barrow's a blueprint for how increasing defence spending can boost prosperity. And Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard says it will benefit the country.
And the investment in the new submarines is not only investment in Barrow, it's investment in the nuclear supply chain right across the country. nuclear reactors from Derby, engineering from constituencies from the north of England to the southwest where I represent. It is precisely because defence should be an engine for growth that we're investing more of our defence budget in British firms, because we want the contracts staying in the United Kingdom rather than going overseas, contributing to our growth and to creating good, high-skilled jobs, especially for our young people.
However, Tory party chairman Nigel Huddleston says Labour are regurgitating Conservative policies.
Welcome the fact that Labour are stealing some of our policies when it comes to tackling welfare spending and obviously increasing defence spending. But there is clear blue water between us and Labour.
Kemi Badenoch insists people will believe Conservative promises of lower taxes and better services despite their recent record in government. The leader of the opposition has been launching the Tories' local election race in the South East.
You will trust us because we have delivered lower taxes than any other party. Labour is raising taxes even higher. But at local level, Conservative councils consistently deliver better services at a lower rate. Look at Birmingham, that's raising taxes up by 21%. We don't do that. So people right now will be getting their council tax bills for the year. The Conservative councils are lower. If you vote for something else, you will get something much worse. So we are standing on our record. I'm not here to say that we got everything right or we were perfect. That's far from the truth. Because if we were, we would still be in government.
The Bank of England's held interest rates at their current level of 4.5%. It comes at a time of increasing economic uncertainty and the threat of tariffs to global trade. The bank will have also considered the rising costs associated with the government's first budget and the additional bill from employers' national insurance contributions. Borrowing costs have been gradually reduced since August. It's eased pressure on some households. Last night, the US Federal Reserve held its rates, but also downgraded its economic forecast amid warnings of Donald Trump's tariffs driving up prices. An independent report has found cancer screenings are being missed and crimes misreported because data is often collected about gender identity rather than biological sex. It found transgender patients are not being called for vital screenings with potentially fatal consequences, and a widespread loss of data on sex across the health, policing and education sectors. The government-commissioned report has urged the NHS, police and military to stop prioritising gender. The Department of Health says it will urgently investigate. Donald Trump has suggested the US could take ownership of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to act as a form of security guarantee. The White House says it was discussed in a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky last night, a day after Mr. Trump spoke to Vladimir Putin. Ukraine's president indicated, though, only the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant on the front line was discussed. That has been controlled by Russia since March 2022. Well, Mr. Zelensky is expected to brief EU leaders on his call with Donald Trump shortly. EU leaders meeting in Brussels. They are expected to pledge unwavering support for Ukraine, as Zelensky has been saying that Russian strikes overnight expose Putin's true attitude towards peace. But there have been cross-border attacks on both sides. A state of emergency has been declared in Engels in Russia's Saratov region following a Ukrainian drone attack on a strategic air bomber base. Now, this is more than 430 miles from the front lines of the war. In the Donetsk region of Ukraine, 2 people there have been killed as a result of Russian attacks. Medical officials in Gaza say at least 55 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli strikes across the Strip overnight, a warning some viewers might find the following footage upsetting. These scenes are from the Indonesian hospital in Beit Lahia after Israeli forces targeted the north of the Strip. Israel resumed its air and ground operations across Gaza this week after the collapse of a ceasefire that had broadly held since January. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 430 people have been killed over the past few days. Israel's prime minister says any ceasefire negotiations would now take place under fire. And the former Formula One owner and broadcaster Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. The Irishman, who had aggressive prostate cancer, died in the early hours of Thursday morning. His team, Jordan, won 4 Grand Prix in 15 years in the sport, giving a debut to the future 7-time champion Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill, who won the title in 1996, also drove for Team Jordan. Eddie Jordan's family say he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his loved ones in Cape Town. And the King and Queen are continuing their official visit of Northern Ireland today. They will drop in on a cancer research centre and attend a reception for domestic violence victims. Yesterday, Charles and Camilla met the First and Deputy First Ministers at Hillsborough Castle and then visited Commercial Court in the Cathedral Quarter, which has been ranked as the most attractive street in Northern Ireland. It's also home to the rather aptly named Duke of York pub. Not sure if they went in, a well-known live music venue. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more at past.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 11 minutes past 1. Now the Prince of Wales has arrived at the presidential palace in Tallinn, Estonia, all for talks with the Estonian president.
Yes, His Royal Highness is visiting Estonia today to meet British troops on the border with Russia, to try and learn about how they're working to help bolster NATO's front lines and to learn a little more about how they're responding to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Well, our very own royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, joins us now from Tallinn live. And Cameron, you're outside the presidential palace.
I am indeed, Tom, and the Prince of Wales is inside the presidential palace having a meeting with President Anna Karis. He arrived around half an hour ago in a British number-plated Range Rover, so presumably that's come across from London, greeted by a group of school children who very kindly gifted him a cuddly toy and a letter for Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. And of course, this is all about Prince William's soft power, strengthening the relationships between both Britain and Estonia. But he also wants to highlight here the plight of Ukrainian refugees in that ongoing conflict with Russia. 60,000 have fled to this country since the start of that conflict. If you go by population numbers, that's around the equivalent of 3 million refugees coming to the United Kingdom. And later on today, Prince William will be visiting a school rapidly built following that conflict started and following Russia's invasion to continue the education of Ukrainian refugee children. And he's particularly interested in the mental health provision available to them and wants to hear about how they have settled into their new lives here in Estonia. But of course, Estonia and Britain, two key NATO allies, and Britain's largest permanent deployment of army troops anywhere in the world is here in Estonia. 900 troops are based at the Tapa base, which is around 62 miles from the Russian border, which is about an hour and a half's drive. And Prince William will be visiting them in his capacity as the Colonel-in-Chief of the Mercian Regiment. That regiment taking over the battle group for the next 6 months on training exercises with other NATO allies, particularly Estonia, but also a French contingent as well. Of course, all very close to the Russian border indeed. And I think that image of the future king and future head of the armed forces quite so close to the Russian border in the context of NATO does send that powerful message to the world that it appears that the West is trying to unite rather than divide.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent with Prince William in Estonia. There you go.
Well, we're going to go back towards the United Kingdom now, because off the back of ditching net zero targets and renewing her party's policies, or at least promising to, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, is today arguing why the Conservatives deserve your vote in May's local elections.
Yeah, speaking earlier, in a bit of a sombre tone, I think it's fair to say, she did argue that the Conservatives will bring lower taxes and better services, but she admitted it wasn't going to be an easy campaign.
It will be the first time since the general election, the greatest defeat in our party's history, that we fight these seats. And if you mapped that general election result of 2024 onto this coming May, then we don't win the councils like we won in 2021. We lose almost every single one. But I think we're going to do a bit better than that. But we know that these elections will be extremely difficult.
Well, joining us now is someone who was in the room for that leadership launch, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Because, Catherine, the Conservatives have an uphill battle this May.
Yes, you can say that again. Welcome to Beaconsfield. They have an uphill battle because the last time these council seats were fought was at the height of Boris Johnson's popularity back in 2021 with that vaccine bounce. The country felt very differently about the Conservatives then to how they do now. So look, they're expecting to lose hundreds of seats. There's 1,600 up for grabs. The Conservatives won about 1,200 of those last time, and of the 24 English councils, they've currently got control of about 16. Now here, they are very, very worried about the Liberal Democrats, who think that they've got a good chance of picking up tons of council seats in these sort of true blue areas. Elsewhere, they're equally worried about reform. And of course, the problem with local council elections is no matter how good your individual local councillors might be, people very obviously will judge you on your national record. I asked Kemi Badenoch about that. Let's have a look at what she had to say. No matter how good your local councillors may be, people very often vote on a verdict on the national party. Under the Conservatives, we had well over a decade of economic stagnation, wages barely moving. You're surrounded by posters saying lower taxes, better services. But in government, the Conservatives delivered the opposite of that. Why are people going to trust you now? Isn't going to take a lot longer, realistically, for you to get a hearing?
They will trust us, because we have delivered lower taxes than any other party. Labour's raising taxes even higher. But at local level, Conservative councils consistently deliver better services at a lower rate. Look at Birmingham, that's raising taxes up by 21%. We don't do that. So people right now will be getting their council tax bills for the year. The Conservative councils are lower. If you vote for something else, you will get something much worse. So we are standing on our record. I'm not here to say that we got everything right or we were perfect. That's far from the truth, because if we were, we would still be in government. What I am here to say is that this is a party that is under new leadership, that is going back to authentic Conservative principles and has a record that it can stand on.
So it's very difficult for the Conservatives because the average person in Slovenia is now almost as well off as the average person here. We simply haven't recovered after the financial crisis in the way that other countries have. So judge us on our record, she says, but I think that's going to be tricky. Also, she said, if you vote Labour, you get trash. She was, of course, talking about tax rises, council tax rises that Labour had promised not to bring in. But it's worth saying that the battle for the Conservatives in these local elections is really not about Labour. Labour are not defending many of these council seats. It's really a battle with the Lib Dems and Reform. Now, they're very keen to point out that in council elections so far since the election, they say Conservatives have won 59 and Reform have only won 12. One other thing that strikes me is Kemi Badenoch took a pop at Nigel Farage the other day, saying that he was a bit showbiz, and that was meant as an insult. When I go to Reform rallies, they're so glitzy. There's noise, there's lights. They sort of pull out all the stops. There's an energy and enthusiasm. Here, Kemi Badenoch, she's very calm. She's very earnest. She's very methodical. It feels very Conservative in the sort of old-fashioned way. But is she really going to get a hearing? We've got a few weeks till we get the answers.
Old-fashioned conservatism in Beaconsfield, the seat of Benjamin Disraeli. Perhaps it all fits together, although I'm not sure Benjamin Disraeli would have looked brightly on the idea of the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition using the word trash instead of rubbish. Quite American.
I'm just hoping we haven't encouraged anyone to emigrate to Slovenia as an economic migrant. I mean, if things are so great over there.
I mean, it might soon happen. Catherine Forster, thank you very much for joining us.
Hopefully not. No, Britain has more to come.
Well, we're going to bring you a breaking story here, but I should remind you that we're going to be bringing you the coverage of all of the local parties launching their local elections before the 1st of May.
But yes, things have got a bit strange in the House of Lords. Protesters have interrupted the Lords as they were debating a particular issue, and you can hear them shouting, "Lords out, people in," and they've been throwing leaflets around.
significant anniversaries where we have veterans who fought for our freedom still alive.
Well, this was the protest that we see now in the House of Lords in the last few minutes, shouting Lords out, people in, throwing those leaflets, and we can say on the face of those leaflets were the words aristocrats and oligarchs out. I think they might have been a bit confused about which century they're in, because as far as I last checked, the House of Lords is mainly full of life peers, not aristocrats.
Former MPs.
Former MPs, political advisors, and people from sport and the clergy. But, you know...
MPs that have lost their jobs and then they're given their retirement in the House of Lords.
I mean, just look at the members... I mean, how many of these people sitting on these benches do these people actually think are hereditary?
I think there's a lot of people in this country who think there are, you know, huge amounts of these type of landed gentry people who are controlling everything.
I was just looking at the people in the screen there. I mean, there's Jenny Chapman, who was the MP for Darlington. She lost her seat and now is in the cabinet. She's not an oligarch.
Oligarch.
Not an oligarch. I mean, you look at all of the different appointments to the House of Lords that have been happening recently. I mean, Theresa May's in the House of Lords. Is she an oligarch?
Aristocrat.
I mean, is Lord Frost an oligarch? Is Baroness Jenny Jones an oligarch?
It may not be accurate, but not all protests are accurate, are they? They just have to be punchy, and I'm not sure the little paper leaflets were particularly punchy.
I tell you what, the House of Lords security is a lot less than the House of Commons, because if we remember back to 2005, when Fathers for Justice broke into Prime Minister's questions and threw down purple gas canisters that interrupted Tony Blair's Prime Minister's questions, spewing out purple gas. They had to adjourn the session, and they thought it could be really something quite nasty. So after that, they blocked off the public gallery with glass, so that now if you go in as a member of the public, as you're entitled to, you have to sit behind glass to watch Prime Minister's questions. I wonder if now we're going to see similar sort of big restrictions placed on the House of Lords.
Imagine looking outside the window today and thinking, oh, it's the most beautiful, hot, sunny day of the year, first day of spring. I'm going to go to the House of Lords and shout at a few peers. Throw a few leaflets around.
Something to do, isn't it?
Something to do, isn't it? Yes, probably. Anyway, got lots more coming up. Yes, a debate today. Mothers in Hungary are going to be exempt from paying income tax for their entire lives if they have 2 or more children. Is that the right move? Should we do that in this country? Apparently people aren't having enough babies.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that.
When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 1, and mothers in Hungary will be exempt from paying income tax for the rest of their lives if they have 2 children. This under plans to combat the country's plummeting fertility rates.
Yeah, so mothers with 1 child will be exempt until they turn 30. Oh, I didn't know that bit. OK, so you can have 1 and still benefit for a while. This comes as forecasts predict Hungary's population will fall to 8.5 million by 2050 compared to 9.6 million today. But we want to ask whether this is a good idea for Britain, because we've apparently got a plummeting birth rate as well.
Well, to debate the move, we're joined by the former Conservative MP Miriam Cates and the broadcaster Steve Miller. Miriam, over to you first. Why is this a good idea?
Well, it's a good idea because falling birth rates are a massive problem, not just for Hungary, but across the West, and actually increasingly not in the West as well. So basically, if on average women have fewer than 2.1 children, that means that over time your population will decrease. But it's not just decreasing, it's the fact that you've got fewer and fewer younger people as you have more and more older people, and that creates enormous problems in things like paying for pensions and healthcare. And that is the main reason why tax is now so high in the West, particularly in this country. Now, Hungary saw this problem. They actually had one of the lowest birth rates in Europe about 20 years ago, only about 1.1 children per women, so catastrophically low. And they decided to completely reform their welfare state through an all-behind family policy, incentivise marriage, incentivise having children, give people interest-free loans to buy flats and cars and all those kind of things, and to try to make sure that they do have enough Hungarian people to pay tax in the future and build their population.
Oh, sounds brilliant to me. Steve, you've got some concerns, though, don't you?
Can we get the potholes fixed first? Perhaps we should start there.
Absolutely not.
This is a ridiculous proposal for several reasons. The first one is economically we can't afford it. We just can't afford it. It would cost a fortune. And what would happen, of course, then is your funding for public services would also dip as well. So logical common sense says that's not going to work. The other thing is, if you're going to bribe people to have children, and that's what it is, bribing people to have children, unfortunately, we're going to have a strong percentage of those people that kind of have kids and then regret it. So my concern is, last year we had 83,630 children taken into care, that number would inflate massively. And the third thing is as well, we will have massive resentment in the workplace. Why should I go to work to be paying for other people to have their children? No, you have to make your own money in life. There are other ways as well that you can actually encourage people to have children. But the reality nowadays is I hear lots of people say now, I wouldn't want to bring kids into this world the way the world is now. It's not just economically. It's not just about finance. It's about the situation of the world, the war, immigration out of control, the NHS completely trashed. So whilst it sounds beautiful and it sounds like, oh, Santa's here to say here's some more money for you, the practical application of this in the UK at the moment is not going to work.
OK, Steve, 2 good points there. I'm going to put one of them to Miriam straight away, and that's the idea that you have 2 high-powered, successful people, one a man, one a woman, both on the same salary. Why should the woman get perhaps 50% more money thanks to her tax cuts?
Well, firstly, it doesn't start straight away. So to start with, in Hungary, you get very good maternity pay. I think 100% pay for the first year and then 70% for the 2 years afterwards. So the initial benefit is not about a tax benefit. It's basically meaning that the couple can afford to have children in those early years when you do tend to lose an income. And I think let's just be honest here. It is normally the mother that stays at home. That is normally best for the baby. So it's absolutely right to do this through maternity pay. But then really all this is trying to do is say to women, do you know what? We're going to make sure that you are not paying a penalty for having children. Yes, you are probably going to take some time out of the workplace or work part-time when your children are small. That's what most families choose to do. But if you do that, we will make sure that when you return to work, you will be essentially paid back for this. And I think just to the point there that who's going to pay for this? Well, who's going to pay for your pension if people don't have children? Because I think what people don't realise is that there isn't some pension pot with your name on it. Current taxpayers are paying current pensioners' pensions. And we've gone from 4 people of working age for every pensioner.
Steve, hang on. Let Miriam finish. Steve, let Miriam finish and then we'll come back to you.
In the 1970s, we had 4 people of working age to every pensioner. That balance worked about right for our welfare state. We're now 3 people of working age for every pensioner and fast approaching 2. That's a total disaster. There is absolutely no way that those few taxpayers will be able to pay for that enormous number of pensions in the future. The only answer is to have more children. So really, the question is, how can we not afford to encourage people to have children?
OK, over to you, Steve.
No, because the reality of the situation is that we have thousands of people who are sitting on their backside at home, who can't be bothered to work, who love to reap the benefits that that us taxpayers have to fund. And those are the people that should be getting their backside into work and therefore, you know, topping up the monies for pensions in the future and so forth. The other thing is, common logic just says that this particular policy will not work. We can't afford it.
Well, it's worked in Hungary.
We are broke. We are broke. The way that you do it is you increase flexibility in the workplace, right, for people. That encourages people to have children. And the other thing that the companies could consider doing, which is more cost effective, is to have on-site nurseries for
But
families.
Steve, many countries have tried these things, and in none of them they have worked. Finland has some of the most generous childcare allowances in Europe, and yet has one of the lowest birth rates. It's not what women want. People want to know that they're not going to be broke when they have children.
In Sweden, it works very,
it hasn't.
very
Sweden's got a terribly low birth rate.
And listen, what you're suggesting is that the people that aren't earning very much at the moment should actually probably end up paying more tax to subsidise people to have their children. No, thank you. We pay enough tax at the moment. I do not want to. I am not going to spend more money on subsidising families to have children so that they can reap the benefits of it. No,
OK, I think we're going to have to wrap it up now. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the segment, but an impassioned debate there, I think it's a fantastic idea, I must say. You know, I think people would have 10 children if they knew they wouldn't have income tax.
Well, I'm just glad that Hungary's trying it, so that we can have a look at the data and see what happens, and perhaps learn from that. But Steve and Miriam, thanks indeed for joining us.
All of you.
Interested to know what our viewers make of that one. What do you think? Which side do you come down on? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. Yes, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has just been speaking to the Prime Minister. We're going to be bringing to you that live after your latest headlines with Aaron.
Thank you very much, Emily. Good afternoon to you. Our top stories. The Prime Minister is to host senior military figures from around 20 countries later as they discuss plans for the coalition of the willing and deploying peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. Ahead of that, Sir Keir Starmer's been meeting apprentices from BAE Systems who will build the next generation of the UK's nuclear submarines, and also school children in Barrow-in-Furness. He will later visit a manufacturing site where those nuclear submarines will be built. It comes after the Prime Minister boarded HMS Vanguard on its return home from a deployment in a rare display of Britain's nuclear forces. The PM says Barrow is a blueprint for how increasing defence spending can boost prosperity. Donald Trump suggested the US could take ownership of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to act as a form of security guarantee. The White House says it was discussed in a phone call between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky last night. Ukraine's president, though, has indicated only one, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is on the front line, currently controlled by Russia, was discussed. Zelensky is expected to brief EU leaders on his call with Donald Trump shortly. The EU leaders are meeting in Brussels. They are expected to pledge unwavering support for Ukraine. The Bank of England's held interest rates at their current level of 4.5%. It comes at a time of increasing economic uncertainty amid the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs to global trade. The bank will have also considered the rising costs associated with the government's first budget and the additional bill from employers' national insurance, which comes into effect next month. Borrowing costs have been gradually reducing since August, which has eased pressure on some households through the lower mortgage rates available. The Prince of Wales is in Estonia at the moment. He is there to learn about how the country is bolstering NATO's front lines. Whilst in the capital, His Royal Highness will also learn more about how the country has responded to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Of course, the UK have a significant deployment of forces in Estonia, so the Prince of Wales showing his support for the troops there and indeed the Estonian troops who are fending off Russian aggression. Finally, the former Formula One owner and broadcaster Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. Jordan revealed in December he had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. He ran his own F1 team between 1991 and 2005. He gave that man a debut, Michael Schumacher, who went on to win 7 world titles. Jordan won 4 races with his team over that period before moving into broadcasting. His family say he passed away peacefully, surrounded by loved ones in Cape Town. That's it for the moment. I'll be back with a full bulletin at 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News Travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Fife, the A92 is blocked southbound by an accident between the Tay Bridge and Forgan roundabouts at Newport on Tay, causing queues. There are delays of up to an hour and 20 minutes to Stena Line sailings between Cairn Run and Belfast. In Cumbria, the A7 is closed each way off junction 44 of the M6 north of Carlisle after an accident. In Norfolk, the A10 is closed northbound off the Denver roundabouts at Downham Market after an accident, causing delays towards Kings Lynn. In Hertfordshire, the A414 is partly blocked by an accident at London Coley roundabout, and in London, Cold Harbour Lane in Brixton's closed for an investigation.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And the BAFTA-winning actress, Daisy May Cooper, isn't holding back about what she thinks about Shakespeare. She thinks it's time to ditch the lot.
Well, comparing his plays to studying EastEnders in 600 years' time, she says that kids would be better off learning from TV dramas. But is she onto something, or is the Bard still a class act?
Sometimes it's better not to say anything, isn't it? Anyway, joining us to discuss this is the lifestyle journalist and parenting expert Annette Kello. Annette, is studying Shakespeare these days the same as if you forced children in 600 years' time to study Pat Butcher?
Exactly. I mean, Pat Butcher's earrings to start with, maybe studying those in 600 years. But I think while she has a point that it is very old, I think we need to bring it up to speed and not scrap it, but reimagine it so that people today can learn it. The plays are quite long, which might be quite hard for kids to decipher. But I do think there's something in keeping it. We know that there's loads of words. I think it's 1,700 words that Shakespeare invented. And come on, which ones do you know? Swagger?
Oh, we were talking...
Addiction?
This is cheating, because we were talking a bit about this in the break.
Bandit.
But assassination, critic,
yeah.
majestic...
Swagger.
And phrases like "it's all Greek to me." I mean, these things that just roll off the tongue. I mean, it's so important actually for understanding our own language more than anything else.
Exactly, and actually Jay-Z quoted that he takes inspiration from Shakespeare because apparently there's something to do with the rhythm that is similar to rapping. So I think things like that can be a really good lesson for children to kind of get in the zone with it, because it's quite hard to learn otherwise.
I mean, I can imagine it's very hard to teach Shakespeare these days to young children, because they are the TikTok generation.
GB News, the People's Channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 1:40 in the afternoon, and 9 in 10 councils in England are going to introduce the maximum council tax increase next month.
Oh, goody.
Oh, goody.
Well, the maximum increase is 4.99%, and after that, of course, they have to either perform a referendum or ask permission of Angela Rayner. But 6 councils have been granted that special permission by the Housing and Local Government Secretary to go above 5%.
I think I know where. Let's get the latest with our reporter Anna Riley, who's outside the Bradford Council building for us. Anna, I understand Bradfordians are going to be hit with massive hikes.
Good afternoon, Emily and Tom. Yes, it's a 9.9%, so almost a 10% increase here in council tax that residents in Bradford and the surrounding areas that the council covers are going to have to pay from April the 1st. Now, breaking that down, in a Band D property, that means that residents will be paying an extra £170. In a Band A property, they'll be paying an extra £2 to £3 per week. Now, the decision was made behind us here in City Hall, the council building, but it wasn't made quietly. Certainly, it was only made with a majority vote of 6, so many councillors opposed to it, but also members of the public. There were more than 100 people gathered outside here when that decision was made at the budget meeting, opposing the increase to council tax in Bradford, and also dismay and cries from the public gallery as well. When that meeting first started, there were shouts of not a penny more, and that the demonstrators had to actually be brought away by the police. Such a strong feeling they had about this increase. Now, the council say that they've had to make the increase because they've had cuts of £350 million to their budget since the Conservative government was in 14 years ago, and they say that this increase was needed so that vital services remained running, as well as the no bankruptcy as well to come. Now, we've been speaking to people here in Bradford, and this is what they've got to say.
I think they've got a damn shake. I think they've destroyed this city. Absolutely destroyed it.
I think they've put it up a lot for a lot of people. A lot of people are working and can afford it.
I think it's no good at all myself. I prefer it to stay low. You know, everybody's struggling these days with paying everything, all the bills and that.
I think it's disgusting. I think it's not right because all the money goes to government. They're not helping us at all. They're making the poor poorer and richer.
For like somebody like me who's young, for the future, it's a bit of a worry, and there's enough things to like worry about in the future with the houses and everything and all sorts.
I mean, mine's gone up. I think it's an extra £300–400. I live in a 4-bedroom detached house, but obviously big house, you get big bills with it, and I just think it's too much.
Well, I think it's rather a lot for a lot of people who are struggling already. But having said that, there's a lot of debt, a lot of things that need sorting out, and money's the thing that does it, so there we are.
So the majority of people that we've spoken to opposing that council tax rise, one lady saying that she understood why the council were doing it. Now, the council have given us a statement. They said councils have to set a legal budget. You won't find one councillor in Bradford who really wanted to vote for a 9.99% increase in council tax, but we were between a rock and a hard place. After £350 million of cuts from the last government over 14 years, our finances have been left at an all-time low. along with 30 other councils around the country, we have been given permission to borrow money to keep council services running, but this costs the council taxpayer money in debt repayment. Bradford Council tax charge remains below average compared to the rest of West Yorkshire and to other metropolitan councils nationally. So that's what the council have to say. They say these price increases were needed in council tax to keep the council's vital services going, and projections show that by 2030 the council could be facing a deficit of £1 billion.
Tough times for Brad, what did you say?
Bradfordians,
Bradfordians, let's stick with that. But Anna Riley, thank you so much for bringing us that story and talking to many people in Bradford as well. And also, for frankly, standing in front of Bradford City Hall, which is one of the most beautiful city halls in the country. I mean, really great building.
I think you once did a collage of the best city halls from around the country.
Only the internals of them, only the council chambers. It's because I was so frustrated with the
Holyrood.
The Welsh Senedd. Breaking news!
Yes, we have some breaking news. Go on.
Well, breaking news. The former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been cleared in a police investigation into the SNP's finances.
Yeah, she's been cleared. So last year, the force handed over its findings so far to the Crown and asked for direction on the next steps of the probe, known as Operation Branchform. But now we find out today that the former Scottish First Minister has been cleared in this SNP police investigation. So there you go. A good day for Nicola Sturgeon.
A good day for Nicola Sturgeon, although we have not yet heard about Nicola Sturgeon's husband, who was also arrested. We don't know yet about whatever happened to that camper van. There are some serious questions that the SNP as a party still has to answer and that have not yet been concluded. But for Nicola Sturgeon personally, this will be a big sigh of relief.
Yes, her husband's still in court, isn't he? On charges of embezzlement and things like that.
But, of course, he denies all of those
Absolutely, he does indeed. But in other news, if you're in search of some winter sun, that is, here is the forecast.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
For the time being, at least, the UK is warmer than Greece, where cold winds continue to blow. Warm sunshine in Italy, but very unsettled once again for Portugal into Spain. Spells of rain, strong winds, 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in places, and an awful lot of rain as low pressure continues to dominate. That rain spreading into the south of France as well, largely avoiding Italy, where it's going to stay warm and sunny, but this cold wind continues to blow through Greece, although temperatures will recover over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a beautiful day out there today, dry, sunny for many, although not for all, and feeling warm. In fact, it's likely to be the warmest day of the year so far, the first time we exceed 20 Celsius in the UK in 2025. Low pressure is edging closer towards the southwest, and ahead of that we've got this southerly wind picking up. That's going to bring the higher temperatures through the day. It's also going to bring largely cloud-free skies, although some hazy upper cloud is expected in many places and some patchy lower cloud at times as well, particularly across central parts. That aside, it's dry for everyone and it is going to be bright and warm. Temperatures widely in the mid to high teens and in some spots, particularly through southeast into central England, as well as parts of Wales, 20 or 21 Celsius. Now, the far north of Scotland will be cooler. Temperatures at 5 p.m, 7 Celsius, but across much of Scotland it's certainly going to be dry, it's going to be clear as we go into the evening. And Northern Ireland likewise, just some patchy high cloud, but for England and Wales, widespread clear skies away from the southwest, where actually at this stage in the day the wind will be picking up and we'll see the cloud thickening, and that's ahead of the low pressure system I mentioned. That's going to bring in some showery rain by midnight into Cornwall, sweeping into perhaps parts of Pembrokeshire, and then later in the night Ireland and Northern Ireland. But across many western areas, certainly a cloudier night to come. as well as into the south. Clear skies for the north of Scotland, and out of the breeze, perhaps a touch of frost, but certainly because of the breeze and the extra cloud, for most of us it's going to be a frost-free start to Friday. But it is going to be a cloudier start for many, and we'll see these outbreaks of showery rain into western parts of the country, perhaps some thunderstorms in one or two places. Interspersed by dry spells, and it's going to stay dry in the east as well as bright. Another warm day to come before it turns cooler this weekend.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 2. Stop the stink. That's the campaign headed up by locals in Fleetwood over a landfill that they say is making them sick from the smell.
That's right. Residents say it smells like a rotten egg. It's so bad. It's inducing headaches, vomiting and even nosebleeds.
Sounds awful. And, of course, they want to now shut down the landfill. North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is in Fleetwood for us, talking to residents. Sophie, just how bad is it?
Well, you may remember in the last hour I said that we'd been lucky today and that we hadn't experienced it. Well, in the last few minutes, genuinely, I can't express this enough to our viewers. The smell has started and I was almost immediately sick. My cameraman thought it was hilarious because I was heaving. It was that bad. I actually did have to put my peg on my nose, and I'm sure Ollie did capture some lovely footage of me looking rather attractive with that on. So someone that was here for that is joining us now, is Wendy Radcliffe. Wendy, you are a local resident in this area. You experienced that. Please try and convey to our viewers just how bad that smell was.
It's disgusting. It's awful. I mean, it does make you feel sick. And you just wonder what harm it's doing to you as well.
Well, I know that you have recently undergone a medical procedure. Share with us about that and how that makes you feel.
Well, I just had a lung removed about 14 weeks ago, and you know, I'm not to breathe in any strong solvents or bad smells, and I'm worried about what this is going to do to me, and to anybody who lives around here, because it's really bad.
You've been advised, haven't you, to keep your windows and your doors closed, but that's not ideal given that you live in very close proximity to the site.
I mean, we're supposed to lock ourselves up and you can still smell it in the house, so it could still be getting in there and you just wonder what it's doing to your lungs.
Obviously there's this Stop the Stink campaign. What would you like to see happen going forward? There's thousands of residents behind it.
Just get rid of the smell and whatever they have to do to cover it up and get rid of it, and because the bad toxins could be killing us.
Does it make you nervous in terms of the future? Because obviously there's a housing estate just to our side here and they're unable to sell their properties. Does that make you concerned for the future living here?
Yeah, very nervous. I mean, it'll go downhill. Nobody will want to live here. You'll not be able to sell your properties. Properties will go down in price. So we're going to lose a lot of money. So it's very worrying.
Well, it's clearly having a big impact here in Fleetwood. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to quickly read out some statements here that GB News have had from Transwaste, who are the owners of the site. They said that due to Cell 6 starting to produce gas much earlier at a higher rate than expected, they've had to stop waste deliveries and are working to cap Cell 6 with a thick layer of clay in order to completely seal it. They say they will then install 11 deep gas wells to maximise gas extraction from the cell and resolve the odour issue. So they say they're trying trying to tackle the smell here in Fleetwood. We also heard from Borough Council. They say they understand the severity of this matter for all affected residents. The leader of the council, Michael Vincent, and the local MP recently jointly wrote to the Environment Agency asking them to use their regulatory powers to address this issue and calling for the suspension or closure of the site. The council does not have the power to close the site itself. But this is something we've been here all day in Fleetwood. Residents have been coming out in huge numbers talking to us about this issue.
OK, well, Sophie Reaper, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that. And do stay with us here on Good Afternoon Britain. We've got an interview with the Prime Minister coming up next.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's dry and bright for most of us today, and it's the warmest day of the year so far, with temperatures in places above 20 Celsius. But showers are expected to arrive overnight because of this area of low pressure starting to head our way. Now, ahead of that low, we've got a warm southerly breeze, so temperatures higher compared with recent days. But going into the evening, we'll see an increased breeze and increased cloud cover into the south and west of the UK. Perhaps some showers arriving by midnight into Cornwall. Hit and miss downpours. They spread into Pembrokeshire and Northern Ireland by dawn. Perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well. But of course, with the cloud and the increased breeze, for most it's a frost-free and a milder start to Friday. But for the north of Scotland, with some shelter from the winds, there will be a touch of frost first thing. However, certainly a milder start for much of England and Wales. A thick cloud for Wales and the southwest, with outbreaks of showery rain and perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well in some of the heavier bursts. Northern Ireland also seeing some cloud and showery rain, but for Scotland it's another bright start to the day, and this is where the lowest temperatures will be. I think the north of Scotland prone to a few pockets of frost in sheltered spots, but for most it is going to be a frost-free start to Friday. And then an east-west divide. I think in the west we're going to see thick cloud, outbreaks of rain, heavy at times. Towards the east it stays dry and bright for one more day, albeit with more cloud in the sky compared with recent days, and an increased breeze. That's still coming from the south, so it's still going to bring temperatures of the mid to high teens, but it's going to feel a little cooler, particularly along the east coast in that gusty wind. The wind picks up further on Friday night. Gales developing in the far north of Scotland, and further south we've got further spells of rain pushing in from the southwest, and that leads us on to an unsettled weekend. More cloud compared with the week so far, outbreaks of rain and showers, and feeling a little cooler.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next big winner of the Great British Giveaway, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but two sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 20th of March. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Our Home and Security editor has been speaking to the Prime Minister this afternoon ahead of a meeting with the Coalition of the Willing. We'll be bringing you that interview in the next few minutes.
We will indeed. And elsewhere, Prince William has taken a trip to Estonia to show his support for British troops stationed near the Russian border. We're live on the ground in the capital, Tallinn, throughout the show, and we'll bring you the latest pics.
Elsewhere, the real cost of net zero. A shocking Whitehall assessment has revealed the rush to carbon neutrality risks wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and triggering a financial crash to boot.
Dearie me. And elsewhere again.
Significant anniversaries where we have veterans who fought for our freedom still alive.
Oh dear, protesters. Well, they've taken it upon themselves to interrupt the House of Lords. You can hear them shouting, "Lords out, people in," and those leaflets being thrown about that say...
oligarchs and aristocrats out.
Catchy.
Well, elsewhere, spring seems to have sprung, but this doesn't seem to help the fact that the UK has fallen to 23rd in a global ranking of the world's happiest countries. That's down 3 places.
Give us a smile. Do you think it's surprising that we're now the 23rd most unhappy country?
No, most happy.
Oh, most happy. Oh, that's not too bad then. We can live with that.
I would have thought that we would do better. We have done better in previous years, but this is a year that we have fallen down the rankings. I think it's perhaps what's more instructive than the absolute position is the trend. Are we going up or are we going down? And it seems that we are getting less happy in this country.
I mean, we've been told that everything is awful, haven't we?
Yeah.
By the people ruling the country.
But I mean, to be fair, we almost don't need to be told. I mean, we can see how much everything costs, how wages have stagnated, how energy costs are high, how taxes are high. I mean, it's hard to sort of get cheered up in that economic environment.
Oh, well...
Sorry to be the bearer of
you know what?
bad news.
It's the first day of spring.
Yep.
It's the spring equinox. It's sunny in most of the country. So, you know, why not listen to us outside? You can hear the birds chirping away. Enjoy a little bit of fresh air if you can.
1976 that was the summer of love. Was it 1976?
Are you feeling a bit romantic today, Tom?
That long, hot summer that that took the... Was it 74? People will remember at gbnews.com.
The hottest summer.
Long, hot summer that really helped this country get through an energy crisis.
1974. That was the heat wave.
That's because it was when all the strikes were happening, and it's when the general election was going to happen, and Ted Heath called this election "back me or sack me." You know, who governs Britain? But the strikes weren't as debilitating as he thought they would be. The 3-day week wasn't that bad because it was so lovely and sunny outside. And so, despite the dire economic straits the country was in, people have fond memories of that summer because it was so lovely and warm.
I'm not sure I believe that Finland is the happiest country in the world. I mean, it's dark most of the day in the winter.
In the winter, but in the summer, it's got to be absolutely very happy.
I heard it was quite depressing living in Finland. Perhaps, I don't know.
Depends if it's the winter or the summer, I suppose.
Maybe. Like Iceland, perhaps.
Swaps around every 6 months if it's depressed or happy.
Depressed or happy. gbnews.com/your say. We do try to stay positive on this channel, don't we? So not too much doom and gloom. But do get in touch. And it's the headlines with Aaron.
Thanks very much, Emily and Tom. Good afternoon to you. Our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer says members of the so-called Coalition of the Willing are working at pace to develop plans for a peacekeeping force if there's a deal to end the Ukraine war. He will host military leaders from more than 20 countries in London later. Ahead of that, Sir Keir Starmer has been meeting apprentices from BAE Systems and also school children conducting science experiments in Barrow-in-Furness. It comes ahead of a visit to a submarine manufacturing site where the next generation of Britain's nuclear deterrence will be built. Now, the Prime Minister says Barrow's a blueprint for how increasing defence spending can boost prosperity. Well, it all comes after the Prime Minister boarded HMS Vanguard on its return home from a 200-day deployment, a rare display of Britain's nuclear submarines. The Prime Minister says the talks in London later will determine the size and strength of any peacekeeping force for Ukraine.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today in terms of the military plans and operation. What's the capability from the UK and from France and from other willing countries? How does that translate into a plan for the skies, the sea and the borders working with Ukraine? But I'm proud to stand here and say we have got exceptional personnel in our armed forces who have a reputation and respect across the world that they carry with them. And so it is important, in my view, that the United Kingdom is playing a leading role in this because that helps to ensure we get the military and operational momentum in the same way that we've built up the political momentum.
Another set of high-level talks are underway in Europe. They're focusing on future peace in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky's been addressing EU leaders who are themselves deciding upon defence strategy and security measures for Ukraine. Now, all this comes after Donald Trump suggested the US could take ownership of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to act as some form of security guarantee. Ukraine's president, though, has indicated only the Zaporizhzhia nuclear facility on the front line of the war has been discussed, and that has been controlled by Russia since March of 2022. Well, both countries have traded strikes. Volodymyr Zelensky, he says Russian attacks overnight have exposed Vladimir Putin's true attitude towards peace. A state of emergency has been declared in Engels in Russia's Saratov region following a Ukrainian drone attack on a strategic airbase. It's more than 430 miles from the front line. 2 people also elsewhere have been killed in Ukraine's Donetsk region. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch insists people will believe Conservative promises of lower taxes and better services despite their recent record in government. The leader of the opposition has been launching the Tories' local elections race in the South East.
You will trust us because we have delivered lower taxes than any other party. Labour's raising taxes even higher. But at local level, Conservative councils consistently deliver better services at a lower rate. Look at Birmingham, that's raising taxes up by 21%. We don't do that. So people right now will be getting their council tax bills for the year. The Conservative councils are lower. If you vote for something else, you will get something much worse. So we are standing on our record. I'm not here to say that we got everything right or we were perfect. That's far from the truth. Because if we were, we would still be in government.
And independent reports found cancer screenings are being missed and crimes misreported because data is often collected about gender identity rather than biological sex. The report found transgender patients are not being called for vital screenings with potentially fatal consequences. It comes amid a widespread loss of data on sex across health, policing and education sectors over the past decade. Now, this government-commissioned report has urged the NHS, police and military to stop prioritising gender. The Department of Health says it will urgently investigate. The Bank of England has held interest rates at their current level of 4.5%. It comes at a time of increasing economic uncertainty and amid the threat of tariffs to global trade. The bank will have also considered rising costs associated with the Labour government's first budget and the additional bill of employers' national insurance. Borrowing costs have been gradually reduced since August, which has eased pressure on some households through the lower available mortgage rates. Medical officials in Gaza say at least 55 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli strikes across the Strip overnight. A warning some viewers may find the following footage upsetting. Well, these scenes are from inside the Indonesian hospital in Beit Lahia after Israeli forces targeted the north of the Strip. Israel resumed air and ground operations across Gaza this week after the collapse of a ceasefire that had broadly held since January. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 430 people have been killed over the past few days. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says any further ceasefire negotiations will now take place, in his words, under fire. And the former Formula One owner and broadcaster Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. Jordan revealed in December he'd been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. He ran his own F1 team between 1991 and 2005, giving debuts to the likes of Michael Schumacher before he moved into a broadcast role. His family say he passed away peacefully at home in Cape Town, surrounded by his loved ones. The Prince of Wales has been visiting Estonia to learn more about how they are bolstering NATO's front lines. He's been in the capital, Tallinn, meeting the President. His Royal Highness has also been learning about how Estonia has responded to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The Prince of Wales therefore showing his support for not only Estonian troops, but a large deployment of British troops who've been there. He arrived at the presidential palace earlier and he has been having talks inside with the President. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more in about 25 minutes' time.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes past 2. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been making a defence-related visit to the northwest of England, and our very own Home and Security editor has been speaking to him. Shall we take a listen to Mark White's interview with the Prime Minister?
Prime Minister, you were on just a few days ago, that Vanguard submarine coming in. Incredible, but a 200 plus day mission that was on. This is an ageing fleet. Are you convinced that they are still going to be serviceable at a point before the first dreadnought comes in the 2030s? Is it not time perhaps to give the RAF a role in carrying some of that nuclear deterrent?
I have complete confidence in our deterrent, reinforced by my visit earlier this week to the incoming sub, coming back from a long tour, as you rightly say, a long tour in which the team on board were utterly professional, dedicated, working 24/7, day after day, to keep our country safe, to keep the peace, and of course that vital contribution that we make to NATO. Really pleased to be here in Barrow today for the keel ceremony for the Dreadnought, the next generation, and so that's really important to see that pipeline. I'm absolutely confident that we can maintain our capability as a credible deterrent, which it is. It's kept the peace for a very long time, and I'm absolutely determined it will keep the peace for many, many decades to come.
The key threat currently, of course, is Russia in Ukraine. You're going off to meet military chiefs to talk about the operational planning of any kind of peace mission in there. But really, isn't this, at the end of the day, meaningless if Putin says, as he continues to say, no peacekeepers from NATO?
What is important is that if there's a deal, it's a lasting deal, and that Ukraine has sovereignty and security. And what comes with sovereignty is deciding for yourself how you defend your country, not having Russia deciding how you defend your country. So this has to be led by the Ukrainians. What we've managed to do is get political momentum, political alignment, if you like, with a number of countries, the so-called coalition of the willing, 30 or so countries. That is good to have that level of alignment and momentum. What we now need to do is turn that political momentum into operational plans. So we're going from the sort of concept to the plan. And so today we're looking at plans to keep the sea, the sky and borders safe in Ukraine, working with the Ukrainians, because I'm clear in my mind that if there is a deal, and I hope there is, that we need to do the planning beforehand, not after the deal, which is why I'm pleased that we're able to get to this stage today.
Just finally, because I know you're in a hurry, but what could the UK commitment to any peace force be, given that, you know, even just 5,000 troops could actually be 20,000 for those rotating in and out of training and deployment?
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today in terms of the military plans and operation. What's the capability from the UK and from France and from other willing countries? How does that translate into a plan for the skies, the sea and the borders working with Ukraine? But I'm proud to stand here and say we have got exceptional personnel in our armed forces who have a reputation and respect across the world that they carry with them. And so it is important, in my view, that the United Kingdom is playing a leading role in this because that helps to ensure we get the military and operational momentum in the same way that we've built up the political momentum. Thank you.
Well, that was Mark White speaking with the Prime Minister. Let's cross over to the man himself. Not the Prime Minister, but Mark White, of course. Much more important. Mark, what did you make of your conversation with the Prime Minister there?
Well, there's a story to be told, I think, about the way in which the defence industry can impact communities and in a positive way right across the country. Because where we are at the moment is BAE Systems in Barrow, where they, of course, assemble and manufacture the nuclear submarines for the United Kingdom, both the attack submarines, of which we will have 7 attack submarines, and the nuclear deterrent, the ballistic missile submarines, which we of course have 4. We always have one, at least one, at sea at any given time. And what we were here today to see was the keel laying for the first of the replacement of the old Vanguard submarines, the Dreadnought class, which is due to come into service in the 2030s. I think the first question that I put to the Prime Minister there was an important question, though, which was whether the ageing Vanguard class of submarines, and the last one that the Prime Minister went on board just a few days ago to meet the crew as they came back from a 204-day deployment. And these ships, when they come back, these boats, I should say, when they come back, require deep maintenance because they are an ageing fleet. It takes an awful lot to put them back in fighting shape to go back out to sea again. And it is an important question as to whether the Vanguard fleet will still be operationally capable well into the 2030s before the Dreadnought fleet becomes operational. He said that he wasn't looking at this stage anyway to give the RAF a role. It was only about 30 years ago or so that the RAF did play a role in our nuclear deterrent, carrying nuclear bombs as part of that fleet and operation to be able to respond if that decision is made, of course, that ultimate decision to carry out a nuclear strike.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mark White. Very interesting interview with the Prime Minister just there up in Barrow. Mark White will speak to you later, I'm sure. But in other news today, quite a shocking, never seen before, published Whitehall assessment of the effects of net zero on the British economy has been leaked to the Sun newspaper today.
Yes, the leaked government document warns that poor planning for carbon neutrality by 2050 comes with the potential risk of destabilising the entire financial system, wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and even triggering a financial crash.
This is quite incredible coming from Whitehall itself, coming from the government machinery. Joining us now is political commentator Benedict Spence. I mean, Benedict, I imagine that they didn't want the country to see this in the Sun newspaper.
No, I imagine not. And let's just remember, this is the worst case scenario: societal collapse, massive recession, failure of the financial system. It could be better. It doesn't have to be this way. But it's one of those things where, for a very long time, I think a lot of external observers have been sounding the alarm about the rush to net zero, about what appears to be a lack of forethought about a lot of this, and almost just a sort of based on faith, this idea that vibes alone will see us through, even as the rest of the world, many other major powers, decide actually that their own races to net zero carbon neutrality aren't going to happen on the same timeline, and in some cases aren't going to happen at all. Britain seems sort of uniquely possessed almost of the desire to just push forward at all costs, even in the face of expert opinion, international opinion, and the opinion of the voters.
You rightly say, Benedict, that the 10% off GDP growth by the end of this decade and this financial crash as well, these are the worst case scenarios, so perhaps we're over-egging it there. But why don't we look at the central analysis of this macroeconomic impact of the net zero transition? This was published, it's an internal document from the Department for Business and Trade by their Economy and Strategic Analysis team, and it says the impacts of net zero on public finances is negative. This is the central analysis of their work, that public spending will be required to offset the negative impacts on disadvantaged groups. The government will need to find high levels of public sector investment. I mean, this is all negative balance sheet stuff. How then can the Climate Secretary, Ed Miliband, parade round media interviews hailing net zero as an economic opportunity when his own government is saying behind the scenes that this is bad for the balance sheet?
Because these people are either fantasists or liars, and it doesn't really matter which one they are. And there's nothing unusual about that. They're politicians. They've got this idea, and it's been spun to us for decades now. You have to remember that, the idea about climate change and the need to do something, this is something, therefore it must be done, has been pushed on us since school days for a couple of decades now in this country. And there is this belief that the public, therefore, will just sort of go march in step blindly behind it, going, yes, the climate crisis is terrible, and yes, any price to pay to avert it is probably desirable. But actually, money talks, ultimately, and we already have, as you well know, we already have the most expensive electricity in the developed world, despite the fact that we are quite literally made out of fossil fuels. People are feeling that in tandem with the lack of economic growth that we already have. This might be viable, net zero might be viable, if we were a dynamic country that was creating lots of wealth in order to pay for this vanity project.
Absolutely.
But we're not. We can't even get basic services to work. So what business do we have, really, when, as I say, we have access to all sorts of raw materials in the earth and in the sea? What business do we have going, no, we're not going to use that. We're just going to impoverish ourselves even more, even as our competitors, big competitors, push on ahead with other sources of electricity.
Yeah, and yet successive governments have signed us up to all of these laws and targets. I just wonder if you've had a chance to have a look at the story leading the Telegraph at the moment that seems to have appeared in the last 2 hours or so. They say that Reform UK has been forcing some of its local candidates to sign gagging orders. So NDAs have been used for branch officials, candidates and the like.
Yeah, big fans of free speech, it turns out, at the Reform Party. I absolutely love it. And it's just what you want to see when when political sentiment for both of the major parties has absolutely fallen off a cliff, for an insurgent party to come along and then behave as if actually it can pretty much do what it wants. I don't think that the Reform Party has demonstrated in the last couple of months that it is a serious party of government in waiting. And the latest poll that I saw out today had them on 27%, well ahead of Labour. That's very concerning, actually, that you have a party that is behaving like a closed shop, that responds very aggressively to any kind of internal dissent. I mean, for heaven's sake, what we were just talking about just there, about net zero, maybe if there had been a little bit more fervent dissent from within government, from within the major political parties, we wouldn't be in that particular situation. If Reform thinks it's an acceptable thing to gag members of staff, to kick people out who dissent, to basically have it as a one-man show, a one-party, sort of a one-party system, if you like, that's what they want to push ahead with, where absolutely no other lines of thought within the broad church are tolerated. I mean, good luck with that. You'll do well whilst you are the party of protest and whilst the major parties are as bad as they are. But that's untenable long term, and people won't put up with it from within the party, as we've already seen with Rupert Lowe and the likes of Ben Habib as well. The dissent will come either way.
OK, should say that Reform Party have said that these gagging orders were sent out in error, although the Telegraph report does seem to say that they were pretty ubiquitous. Benedict Spence, thanks so much for joining us, political commentator, of course, across those two political issues.
Yes, I'm sure we'll find out more on that reform story very soon. But if you want to make your spring spectacular in our latest Great British Giveaway, your chance to win £17,777 in tax-free cash, here's the details.
Spring has sprung with a Great British Giveaway, and we're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, taking care of your skin and body is one of the best ways to get in shape for the warmer days ahead. But what are the celeb secrets behind a glow-up? And what latest trends are the A-listers following to look and feel their best? Well, joining us now to share some of those secrets is the founder of Celebrity Skin Talk, Scott McGlynn. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Right, so...
Spill it. Tell us all your secrets.
Well, the main thing is hydration, okay? We've heard it so many times before. Having water daily is a must. I'll have 15 cups of water a day. It's a must.
What size cup are we talking? Like one of these little ones?
Well, the regular, you know, a bit more bigger than that.
A bit bigger than that.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I knew you were coming, Scott, so
Right.
I came prepared today so you wouldn't tell me off. I've got my big bottle of water.
Check it out.
2 of these a day.
Yeah, and yours is time, which is really cool.
Yeah,
I like
it is. It has all my times. I am slightly behind, but then I have been presenting the news show for the last hour and 40 minutes. So,
so you're
I'm cracking on. Aside from water, what else can we be doing to protect our skin? That's the thing that I'm really big on. I wear Factor 50 on my face every day.
Really?
Every single
so even
day.
in the winter?
Yeah. No matter what, because the UV is still coming through, isn't it? No matter what time of year it is. So it's so important. I'm 27 now. Give my age away on the telly there. But I'm 27 and I think skincare at a young age is so important. So please agree with me and say... please tell me I'm doing the right thing.
Hydration, what else do we need to do?
Well, the hydration and the SPF is a good point, OK? So I'm Celtic all over. So I'm Welsh, Scottish, Irish, so me and the sun do not go on.
Likewise,
so I'm always a 50 person anyway. If it's raining, snowing, whatever the weather, still wear your SPF. It's a must. And people do not know that the UV rays from our phones, our flat screens, TVs, this is aging us.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 2. Now, off the back of ditching net zero targets and renewing her party's policies, at least in the future, so she says, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, is today arguing why the Conservatives deserve your vote in the May's local elections.
Yes, so speaking a little bit earlier, she argued that the Conservatives will bring lower taxes and better services, but she did admit that it was not going to be an easy campaign.
Well, let's get the thoughts of the former Lib Dem MP, Mark Oaten, because, Mark, Kemi Badenoch is right that this is going to be a tough uphill fight for the Conservatives, not least because the last time these seats were elected was the height of the Boris bounce.
Look, I think it's going to be tough for them. I think it's probably going to be tough for all parties. These are the elections that nobody really wants. For the Conservatives, as you said, the backdrop is that they were against really good results last time, so it's really hard to improve on those. And Kemi hasn't really established herself. For the Labour Party, we're seeing splits, some of their councillors protesting and leaving as a result of these benefit cuts. And it'll be the electorate's first real chance to give a verdict on the Labour government, so that's not going to go down very well. The Reform Party possibly has the most to gain from these, but they're not quite ready yet. They're not quite organised at a local level. So I think for all sorts of reasons, the parties probably wish that these elections weren't going to happen. And in some cases, of course, they have actually been cancelled due to local government reforms.
Might this be the time for smaller parties to do very well, like the Liberal Democrats, like the Reform Party, while Labour is quite unpopular at the moment and the Conservatives are yet to make any ground?
Look, I think you'll see that. Traditionally, the Lib Dems love local elections. They're very good grassroots politicians. They bed in, they have popular local councillors, they stuff leaflets through your door, and they are good at getting the turnout. So I would expect the Lib Dems to do relatively well. The Greens are interesting. How will they respond to this net zero debate that's taking place? Will it encourage some of their core supporters to come out? Possibly yet. But the big fascinating thing is Reform. They're 27 points in the opinion polls. They're doing really well as a national organisation. But can they cut it locally, where you have to really be grassroots operators rather than just have Nigel Farage on the television? And I think all parties will be looking to see what happens to that Reform vote.
That's such an important point, that this election is more about turnout necessarily than popularity. I mean, the turnouts we know in local elections are definitely sub-half. In some cases, a mere quarter of the vote turns out to vote. So those who can actually knock on doors, find their voters, drag them kicking and screaming to the polling stations are those who do well. So it's about organisation more than anything else to some extent, and motivation. And I suppose that's where we'll really see whether or not parties that are perhaps newer in certain areas, like Reform and the Greens, live up to their polls.
You're absolutely right, Tom. This is a grassroots operation. And, you know, to get people to come out potentially on a cold, miserable Thursday in May is not easy, particularly when they're a little bit fed up with politics. So you need, as you say, people knocking on doors, people marking who's voted, lots of new techniques to get voters to come out in local elections. Do Reform know how to do that? I don't think they do. Have they been trying to look at what the other parties do, particularly the Lib Dems? Yes, they have. This is going to be an early test for them. Let's see how they do.
OK, well, Mark Oaten, former Liberal Democrat MP, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. I think Reform will be looking at some of the tactics from the Liberal Democrats. They are forced to be contended with on the local stage in some constituencies anyway.
I saw some analysis.
Leaflets everywhere. You can't move anywhere for one.
Some analysis from Britain Elects of the recent by-elections, council by-elections that have taken place against national polling. How has the actual voting turned out? The Lib Dems have done double what their national polling has been, because they can know where their voters are, knock on doors. And the Reform Party about 5 points lower than their national polling, because it's about whether or not those voters, even if they want to vote for you, frankly, if they know that the election is on, particularly for a by-election for a local council seat, or if their door has been knocked on or not, these can be massive, massive factors.
Oh, yeah, and the Liberal Democrats will campaign literally on something that is only affecting your street, with those 50 houses that are on that road. They are meticulous in being as localised as possible. In some areas, of course, not everywhere, but in some areas.
Well, of course, here on GB News, we're going to bring you the full coverage of all the local elections, including the launches of all of the parties ahead of voting, which is, and mark it in your diaries, the 1st of May.
You'll be staying up all night, won't you, Tom, I imagine? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, police forces and the courts are allowing criminals to self-identify their gender if they've not legally changed sex. We're going to dig into that after your headlines with Aaron.
Thank you very much, Emily and Tom. Good afternoon to you. It is 2:33. Sir Keir Starmer says members of the so-called Coalition of the Willing are working at pace to develop plans for a peacekeeping force if there's a deal to end the Ukraine war. He is hosting military leaders from more than 20 countries in London. Earlier, Sir Keir Starmer met apprentices at BAE Systems. Now, that's the company responsible for delivering the next generation of Britain's nuclear submarines. And the Port of Barrow is to be granted royal status over what the government says is its unique and critical contribution to national security. The Prime Minister says Barrow is a blueprint for how increasing defence spending can boost prosperity. Well, it comes after the Prime Minister boarded HMS Vanguard on its return home from a 200-day deployment in a rare display of Britain's nuclear vessels. The Prime Minister says the talks taking place in London will determine the size and strength of any peacekeeping force for Ukraine.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today in terms of the military plans and operation. What's the capability from the UK and from France and from other willing countries? How does that translate into a plan for the skies, the sea and the borders working with Ukraine? But I'm proud to stand here and say we have got exceptional personnel in our armed forces who have a reputation and respect across the world that they carry with them. And so it is important, in my view, that the United Kingdom is playing a leading role in this because that helps to ensure we get the military and operational momentum in the same way that we've built up the political momentum.
Volodymyr Zelensky says a series of Russian airstrikes show the world the true attitude of Russia towards peace. He's described Vladimir Putin's recent statements as propaganda. Zelensky's been briefing European leaders on last night's call with Donald Trump, who suggested the US could take ownership of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to act as a form of security guarantee. Well, EU leaders in Brussels are expected to decide their defence strategy and also pledge further security measures for Ukraine. Meanwhile, at least 2 people have been killed and 10 injured in Ukraine from overnight Russian strikes, while Russia's declared a state of emergency after a drone attack on one of its airfields. The Ukrainian drone attack took place in Engels, in Russia's Saratov region. It is more than 430 miles from the front lines. Tributes are being paid to the former Formula One owner and broadcaster Eddie Jordan, who's died at the age of 76. The Irishman, who had aggressive prostate cancer, died in the early hours of Thursday morning. His team, Jordan, won 4 Grand Prix in 15 years of competing in the sport. It gave that man, Michael Schumacher, his debut. A future 7-time world champion, Damon Hill, who also won the world title, drove for Jordan as well. His family said he passed away peacefully, surrounded by loved ones in Cape Town. Their tribute to him, Eddie Jordan, brought an abundance of charisma, energy and Irish charm everywhere he went. The Prince of Wales has been visiting Estonia, learning about how they are bolstering NATO's front lines. He has been in the capital, Tallinn, meeting the country's president and how they're responding to the ongoing war in Ukraine. The Prince of Wales not only showing his support for Estonian troops, but also a large British deployment who are in the country. So he's been in the presidential palace for talks with the president. Those have taken place and he has now left. So a military engagement of sorts for Prince William. And the UK slipped down 3 places to 23rd in the list of the world's happiest countries. Finland has been ranked the world's happiest country again, 8 years in a row, according to the UN's World Happiness Report. Now, these are all based on people giving answers to how they rated their own lives, health and wealth, the key factors. Scandinavian countries dominating the top 4. Ireland were placed 15th. Those are your latest headlines. Tatiana will be here for more at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Fife, the A92 is closed southbound between the Tay Bridge and Forgan roundabouts at Newport-on-Tay after an accident causing queues. There are delays of up to an hour and 20 minutes to Stena Line sailings between Cairnryan and Belfast. In Cumbria, the A7 is closed each way off junction 44 of the M6 north of Carlisle after an accident. On the M6 in Warwickshire, the inside lane's closed northbound past a breakdown between junctions 3 and 4 from Coventry to the M42. In London, Coldharbour Lane is closed off Brixton Hill for an investigation. And in Wiltshire, the A350 is closed at West Knoyle after an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Good afternoon, Britain. Welcome back. It's now 2:41 in the afternoon, and criminals are getting to pick their gender. Yes, this is all because the government is refusing to force police and the NHS to record biological sex in their records, even though it was recommended by an independent review. It's feared that the self-ID policy, deciding what your gender identity is, which remains widely in force, skews some of these crime statistics. Well, joining us now is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Sex Matters, Maya Forstatter. Maya, it's quite incredible that public bodies, including the NHS and the police, which is what I'm most concerned about, are recording the gender identity of perpetrators of crimes rather than their biological sex. How did we get to this place?
It's happened really over the past 10 years. What happened was, for years and years, all public bodies collected your sex. It was very simple, sex, male or female. And then about 10 years ago, they started saying gender. And they still meant sex. It was sort of, I think, seen as more polite. And when you used to have paper forms, if you wrote sex on it, people would say yes, please. So it was just used to say as a more polite way of saying sex. And then that shifted to being gender identity, and there was more than two options. So it was male, female, other, preferred self-describe, and so on. And so the meaning of male and female shifted from being about sex to being about gender identity without really any parliamentary oversight, anyone thinking through what the implications would be, and certainly not thinking through what the risks and harm for women were.
It makes me think of the number of cases that are written up in the press where you have a transgender woman who's been convicted or is in court for the rape of a woman or sexual assault of a woman, and they're referred to as she.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most obscene example of this. Rape is a crime that can only be done by a man in this country. So anyone who's accused of being a rapist is by definition a man. And to call that person she, whether it's in the police station, in the police records, in court, or in newspapers and reporting of it, is a further abuse of what is almost always a female victim.
And I guess in the NHS, I mean, huge health concerns that potentially diagnoses are incorrect, inaccurate, because they're taking down the gender identity rather than the biological sex. And we know that different things happen to men and women according to their biology. That's pretty obvious. We've known that for a long time. But just reading your tweet, you seem to be in consensus with what Wes Streeting has had to say about this morning. He said that the Sullivan Review underlines the importance of recording biological sex, not just for research and insight, but also for patient safety. Doing so does not prevent us from recording, recognising and respecting people's gender identity when these differ. So are you supportive of that essentially these bodies, including the NHS, can record both the gender identity and the biological sex?
I think the most important thing is that they record the biological sex, which is sex. That's the default. If somebody then wants to say, you know, I'd like to be called Z, or some other pronoun, that can be recorded along with, you know, whether they're a vegetarian or other particular personal circumstances. But it's not a category about a person in the way that sex is. And it certainly shouldn't be recorded in those fields that are supposed to be immutable, that you're supposed to be able to trust. You know, there's all kinds of things in your medical records that you can write down, but in the data fields where it says sex, it should mean sex.
OK, well, Maya Forstatter, thank you very much indeed. It's very alarming that a public body would choose to only record the gender identity of a person, even in our police, even when someone's convicted of a crime. I mean, quite incredible. Mind boggles. It does look as though Wes Streeting, at least when it comes to the NHS, is saying that both should be recorded, that biological sex actually matters, which is nice. It's not always the case that politicians seem to think that does matter. But anyway, let me know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. But if you are in search of some winter sun, I mean, it's a lovely day here in Blighty today, so perhaps you're not. But there is a forecast here for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
For the time being, at least, the UK is warmer than Greece, where cold winds continue to blow. Warm sunshine in Italy, but very unsettled once again for Portugal into Spain. Spells of rain, strong winds, 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in places, and an awful lot of rain as low pressure continues to dominate. That rain spreading into the south of France as well, largely avoiding Italy, where it's going to stay warm and sunny, but this cold wind continues to blow through Greece, although temperatures will recover over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, we are finally going to be celebrating the official start of summer. Also, Donald Trump is expected to be speaking at a digital summit. We're going to bring you that live.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a beautiful day out there today, dry, sunny for many, although not for all, and feeling warm. In fact, it's likely to be the warmest day of the year so far, the first time we exceed 20 Celsius in the UK in 2025. Low pressure is edging closer towards the southwest, and ahead of that we've got this southerly wind picking up. That's going to bring the higher temperatures through the day. It's also going to bring largely cloud-free skies, although some hazy upper cloud is expected in many places and some patchy lower cloud at times as well, particularly across central parts. That aside, it's dry for everyone, and it is going to be bright and warm. Temperatures widely in the mid to high teens, and in some spots, particularly through southeast into central England, as well as parts of Wales, 20 or 21 Celsius. Now, the far north of Scotland will be cooler. Temperatures at 5 p.m, 7 Celsius, but across much of Scotland it's certainly going to be dry, it's going to be clear as we go into the evening. And Northern Ireland likewise, just some patchy high cloud, but for England and Wales, widespread clear skies away from the southwest, where actually at this stage in the day the wind will be picking up and we'll see the cloud thickening, and that's ahead of the low pressure system I mentioned. That's going to bring in some showery rain by midnight into Cornwall, sweeping into perhaps parts of Pembrokeshire, and then later in the night Ireland and Northern Ireland. But across many western areas, certainly a cloudier night to come, as well as into the south. Clear skies for the north of Scotland, and out of the breeze, perhaps a touch of frost, but certainly because of the breeze and the extra cloud, for most of us it's going to be a frost-free start to Friday. But it is going to be a cloudier start for many, and we'll see these outbreaks of showery rain into western parts of the country, perhaps some thunderstorms in one or two places, interspersed by dry spells, and it's going to stay dry in the east as well as bright. Another warm day to come before it turns cooler this weekend.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:50 and the wait is officially over. Spring is finally here. And today, some parts of the UK are set to be warmer than Barcelona and Athens. Well, there you go. And while the weather might be heating up, there's a more troubling story about, yes, the UK has dropped to 23rd place in the global ranking of the world's happiest countries. Now, that's its lowest position in 9 years. So are people out there all depressed and miserable, or has the sun changed their mood? My co-presenter Tom Harwood has disappeared from the studio, and he's outside a barge by the looks of things. Tom.
That's right, Emily. It's the 20th of March. It's the spring equinox, so I've thrown away the scarf, I've put down the coat, and here come the sunglasses, because the spring has sprung. Yes, warmer than Greece, warmer than Barcelona. It's a delight to be here at the Grand Union Canal in Paddington to enjoy the start of the sunshine, the start of the warmth. Who knows, I might even ditch the jacket in a bit. But yes, clearly it is more sunny than we've been enjoying over what has been a cold and at times frosty winter. But clearly people have come out in droves to enjoy what is the sun breaking on a really rather lovely day. And it's not just like this in London, no, across the country the sun is breaking out, whether you're in Manchester, whether you're in Newcastle, or if you're a little bit further south as well. Why not come to a local boozer, or indeed a place of non-alcoholic drink as well? I'll leave you guessing as to what I've got here, but clearly it's a tremendous time to come out, lie back, enjoy the sunshine, and perhaps even have a little drink.
Oh, fantastic stuff, Tom. I hope that is a non-alcoholic drink. You're still on a shift, Tom, I'll have you know, but I'll have an Aperol Spritz for when I get out of the studio, please, Tom. That would be rather nice.
Oh, marvellous.
We're 23rd on happiest country, so we're 23rd. We were 20th last year. Are people that miserable? Do you think it's the weather?
I think it is entirely down to the weather, Emily. Our physiology is perhaps no different to that of a tree, a leaf or a plant. All we need is a bit of sunshine and we perk right up. I've got some house plants back in my house, and you know what? As soon as the sun shines on them, they perk right up, and I'm feeling exactly the same today. I think people across the country need to perhaps get out of the house a little bit after the show has finished, mind, and go on a little walk, perhaps listening to GB News Radio while you do it. Soak up that sunshine and just feel how much your mood improves. I have to say, while I've been sitting here, the clouds have been breaking, what few clouds there are, that is, and I'm getting the hot beam of sunshine on my face. It has improved my mood no end. I mean, this is the real anesthetic. This is absolutely what the country needs. I think it's perhaps no coincidence that countries that get perhaps more sunshine, or at least at certain times of the year, long bouts of sunshine, warm countries, people are more relaxed, people are more happy.
I must say, Tom, you look fantastic in the sun there. You're glowing, and I hope you enjoy your shandy up there on the barge. And say hello to the other people for me. Give them a cheers as well. There we go. Tom Harwood, always up for a challenge, isn't he? Always up for a challenge on this show. Well, this has been Good Afternoon Britain. That was Tom having a lovely time with his... I don't know what he's drinking. I like to think it was non-alcoholic, but I imagine it may well be a bit of a pint of cider, pint of beer, whatever that is, but it looks rather nice. I'll have an Aperol Spritz when I get out of the studio. I hope you're enjoying your time in the sun as well. That's the good thing about GB News, is that you can listen to us on the radio wherever you are, on your phone, on a portable radio if you've got one, so do stick with us throughout the afternoon despite the sunny weather, because it is in fact Martin Daubney up next with the wonderful Martin Daubney Show. Stay tuned.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's dry and bright for most of us today, and it's the warmest day of the year so far, with temperatures in places above 20 Celsius. But showers are expected to arrive overnight because of this area of low pressure starting to head our way. Now, ahead of that low, we've got a warm southerly breeze, so temperatures higher compared with recent days, but going into the evening we'll see an increased breeze and increased cloud cover into the south and west of the UK. Perhaps some showers arriving by midnight into Cornwall. Hit and miss downpours, they spread into Pembrokeshire and Northern Ireland by dawn. Perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well, but of course with the cloud and the increased breeze, for most it's a frost-free and a milder start to Friday. But for the north of Scotland, with some shelter from the winds, there will be a touch of frost first thing. However, certainly a milder start for much of England and Wales. A thick cloud for Wales and the southwest, with outbreaks of showery rain and perhaps the odd thunderstorm as well in some of the heavier bursts. Northern Ireland